I became a planet. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, Survive or Be Eliminated. After a series of adjustments, Guo Sen quickly turned this flat land without too many ups and downs into an area with rich terrain. He moved countless drifting rain clouds to the center of the land, where the towering peaks on the plateau will soon produce snow due to precipitation, thus giving birth to more rivers. And between the continuous mountains, there are many large basins and deep canyons due to the elevation of the terrain. These areas will also gradually have unique natural structures in the future due to the sudden change of terrain. After doing all this in a very short time, Guo Sen finally turned his attention to the birdman. When he adjusted the terrain, he could not avoid the collapse of the mountains and the cracks of the rocks, which caused huge vibrations and noises, and made the birdman mistakenly believe that the end of the world was coming. They were so scared that they hid in their houses and dared not come out, and they didn't even dare to make a sound. Countless bonfires swayed under the strong airflow, and some even went out directly, and the charcoal was blown away. After all this was over, the bird people came out of the house and gathered together. Great God Caligula, please forgive our sins. The priest raised his wooden staff again, then knelt on the ground, and all the bird people knelt together. Damn, is this possible? How come there is a god for everything? But this god called Caligula is probably in charge of disasters and blessings. Do they think they did something wrong, so this happened? Guo Sen couldn't help but laugh in his heart. The bird people are really a strange race. I wonder if they can still maintain respect for the so-called gods after throwing them all to various places on this continent. However, do we have to wait until they all fall asleep? Guo Sen couldn't help it. After all, the stage has been set up, and the only thing left to do is to wait. It would be great if he could control them to fall asleep directly. He suddenly remembered something. Last time, he used his ability to make the human tribal leader say something that was impossible to say. What is the principle? Guo Sen still doesn't understand it clearly, but now thinking about it, is it because his ability has a so-called magnetic field effect, which disturbs their minds? If this principle can be used to explain it, then even if these birdmen fall asleep, Guo Sen's mind moved. We are great. The priest suddenly threw away the wooden stick, lay on his back on the ground, and closed his eyelids. The other birdmen who were kneeling on the ground also fell into a coma. Success. Guo Sen found that it seemed that, as long as he wanted, some things could be completely changed. As he wanted. Do whatever he wanted. But he had to think about it. After confirming that all the birdmen were completely asleep, Guo Sen took action. He counted the specific number of birdmen, even counting the eggs of unborn birdmen. 15 people. It's really a lot. The ratio of men to women is roughly 55:45, with more men than women. In terms of age, the number of adults and young people and eggs is basically the same. Without considering other issues, a simple calculation shows that 50 people can be divided into 70 portions. Among the 50 people, if all aspects are taken into consideration, the ratio of men to women and the ratio of age must be considered, and even the eggs must be counted. Tools and various necessities, such as food and salt, must be divided equally. As for weapons, claw blades must be divided equally. Guo Sen took a look and found that there were nearly 100 pairs, 2 for each group. As for those decorative weapons, they should also be divided equally among them. I believe that, after arriving in the new environment, these decorations can also be turned into useful weapons again, right? After calculating for a while, Guo Sen used his ability. This Badman tribe is located deep in the inland of the northern part of the entire land. It has complete facilities in all aspects and there is no need to consider the source of food. Guo Sen simply left the least people and the most eggs here. The remaining birdmen were sent to the coastal beach area, the quiet valley, the upper reaches of the turbulent river, the fertile alluvial plain, the deep dark forest. Of course, all tools, weapons, food, etc. were evenly distributed everywhere. From the perspective of food, it is not a problem. to have enough food for each small tribe for at least 10 days. After doing all this, Guo Sen used his ability again. The bird people scattered all over the place all opened their eyes and woke up. Guo Sen felt that he could not do anything about what happened next. Any further actions to help these bird people would produce a completely unpredictable butterfly effect. Whether the entire land would become this, or whether they would be unable to adapt to the drastic changes in the environment, and eventually become the dust of the times, all depended on them. The sphere continued to rotate, and a new day soon arrived. The bird people also took action. Survival or elimination depends on themselves. Guo Sen raised his eyes. He shifted his attention to space. While adjusting everything on the sphere, he was also distracted by looking at the void of the universe. Compared with the overly peaceful sphere today, the vacuum in the universe can be said to be extremely dangerous. The comets that pass by from time to time, and the various small gravel celestial bodies that suddenly appear from the shadows, will test Guo Sen's nerves. However, perhaps because of good luck, Guo Sen had watched those small celestial bodies pass by far away from him, and head straight for the star. Some of them directly hit the direction of their former mother star, the green gas giant planet. Guo Sen felt that they either became magnificent fireworks above the gas planet, or were captured by it, and became second-class citizens. Thinking that he was still a second-class citizen a long time ago, orbiting around the gas planet, it seemed like it happened yesterday. He orbited the star for several times. Suddenly he discovered something. The visual system has evolved a lot without knowing it. The orange neighbor planet that I originally thought of could be magnified several times, and you could see the layers of orange-yellow rocks on it, as well as the giant mountains that were winding like wrinkles, and the vast and boundless low-lying areas covered with dust. Turning to the big dumpling, this strange-shaped satellite that was obviously spinning alone beside him, he could even see every grain of dust on it. Guo Sen didn't know why this change had suddenly occurred. He just felt that his ability had been getting stronger. As he was sighing about this, he suddenly found that in the far distance, a small rock-like celestial body, as if attracted by him, suddenly rushed towards him at an unimaginable high speed. Even without calculating its orbit, Guo Sen knew that this guy, which seemed to be not much smaller than a big white dumpling, was about to hit his sphere. If it really hit, then all the intelligent life in the world. Absolutely not. Guo Sen launched his mind. Chapter 77, Power of Thought. The asteroid, which is about 1/3 the size of a large dumpling, was approaching Guo Sen at an incredible speed, as if it was blasted out by a giant cannon. Seeing the huge black rock flying at a high speed, Guo Sen was also extremely surprised. According to the normal laws of the movement of celestial bodies in the universe, the appearance of such a small celestial body is extremely strange. Even if a celestial body of this mass approaches here, its speed will definitely not be so fast. However, there is no time to think about these things now. Even if it is lucky enough to rub against me, it will be a devastating disaster for all the intelligent life on the sphere. No, everything. If it really hits the surface of the sphere, everything will be over. Guo Sen felt that he might be instantly penetrated and collapsed by it, and completely become dust in the universe. This is absolutely not allowed. Regarding the life of the sphere, Guo Sen cannot allow any probability of such a thing happening. The asteroid does not seem to intend to slow down, and Guo Sen cannot understand why its orbit is so strange. It seems that it is not even affected by any gravity, and it is speeding from the green gas planet. Guo Sen didn't want to sit and wait for death, and what he could count on was not the big white dumpling that had been silently enduring the bombardment of various small meteorites, but himself. Specifically, it was the incomparably magical and omnipotent willpower. He used his willpower and concentrated it all on one point, the orbit of the asteroid that was rushing straight towards him. Compared to waiting to die on the spot, Guo Sen preferred to choose to fight. Even if there was a 1 in 100 million probability, he would try 100%. What's more, he had an almost omnipotent willpower. The asteroid was gradually approaching, and it soon entered Guo Sen's gravitational circle, and it was really not far from the big white dumpling. Can I let you succeed? Guo Sen's willpower continued to be emitted. The ugly asteroid with bumps all over its body, which was originally rushing like a stray bullet, suddenly shook gently, and because of its fast speed, the frequency of the shaking became larger and larger. Guo Sen knew that his power worked. Continuously using the power of will, the swing amplitude of the asteroid continued to increase, and the speed gradually decreased. The orbit that was originally heading straight towards Guo Sen also deviated. Despite this, it still successfully entered the orbit of the big white dumpling, and continued to attack Guo Sen. However, it suddenly stopped swinging, after advancing a short distance, and completely stopped, floating in the universe. Guo Sen finally breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that within his own gravitational circle, the closer he is to himself, the stronger the wonderful power of will. It is precisely with this power that the asteroid finally stopped moving forward and was captured by him and became a satellite. However, Guo Sen didn't want this thing to become his satellite at all. After being relieved from the tension just now, he didn't even rest for a second and even went to see what the asteroid would look like. Instead, he used his willpower again at the first time and began to throw it outward. However, perhaps this force was too strong, and the asteroid suddenly broke into countless fragments. Affected by the gravity of the planet, they began to fall. Guo Sen laughed in his heart. They gathered into a ball, and I could push them out. Now they have become small pieces of dozens of meters or hundreds of meters. Do you still want to continue? You are dreaming. All the fragments were caught by the power of thought again, and then thrown to the outer layer of the orbit one by one. However, by chance, one of the pieces that was closest to a spherical shape was thrown directly to the big orange planet that happened to be orbiting on the line closest to Guo Sen. Due to the enhancement of the visual system, he could clearly see the whole picture of the rubble hitting the orange neighbor. The little thing with a diameter of less than 500 or 600 meters directly blasted a huge impact crater into it. In an instant, a dazzling red light was emitted there, and then the shock wave lifted the surface rock crust of the big orange, and the air wave instantly enveloped the entire planet. Guo Sen looked at these, and felt a little sorry for his neighbor. Unexpectedly, this asteroid did not do anything to him, but instead hit this guy hard. In this case, if there is any life, I'm afraid that half of it will be destroyed in an instant, right? The matter is finally resolved. Thinking of the assassin who has completely become fragments and disappeared in the deep space of the universe, Guo Sen also breathed a sigh of relief. However, the doubts did not disappear with the resolution of the crisis. This is really too strange. Even if the speed is not so fast, even if the orbit is not that straight, even if the volume is not so large, Guo Sen would not even think too much. Even if only one of them is true, Guo Sen can understand it. However, these three conditions that were originally inexplicable according to common sense are gathered together, which is very wrong. Why is such a large celestial body attracted here? It is not bound by the gravity of the green gas planet, or affected by the gravity of its satellites. Instead, the orbit is like a set one, rushing straight here. Guo Sen has learned a lot about the laws of operation of various celestial bodies in the universe through so many years of life, but none of them violates so many laws like this asteroid. If everyone is like this, not to mention Guo Sen's planet, this star system, and even the entire universe will be completely messed up. Only such a special one appears, which proves that it is definitely problematic. It's a pity that just now, in order to prevent it from becoming a satellite, the tidal force of the global body was changed to cause a disaster such as a tsunami, and it was thrown out directly, but it was directly turned into fragments. In this way, there is no chance to observe at all. Otherwise, how can we find some clues from it? Guo Sen finally recovered his mood with all kinds of questions. This time it is not a gain at all. He now understands how powerful his power is. Now, Guo Sen also has the confidence to face various sudden attacks from small celestial bodies. That powerful willpower, even as big as the guy who was just broken, can completely avoid all risks. However, Guo Sen also has another question. When he captured the big white dumpling, his willpower was not so strong. But what is going on now? Could it be that, while adjusting the terrain on the sphere or even controlling those intelligent creatures, he had increased his proficiency in mind power, or the level of his experience points? Guo Sen suddenly felt that compared to all the puzzles, his ability was the biggest mystery. Where did this power come from, and to what extent would it develop? Would it get out of control? And would it eventually become disadvantageous to him because of this ability? Guo Sen fell into deep thought, constantly orbiting the star. Chapter 78 Conqueror. Guo Sen should have been excited after the crisis was resolved, but he couldn't be happy now. After all, the existence of this asteroid was too strange. Whether it was its size, speed, or orbit, it was extremely strange. However, the incident had already passed, and there was no evidence left after the asteroid was torn apart, so the incident could only be past. The only thing that suffered was his neighbor, the only victim of this incident, the orange planet. After the big orange was hit by a spherical fragment thrown by Guo Sen, the storm on the surface of the sphere lasted for a while. Guo Sen approached its orbit several times, but he found that the surface of its sphere was almost covered with orange smoke and dust, and there was no sign of recovery. He still felt a little guilty, but he couldn't do anything to help the big orange, so he could only watch it suffer. Guo Sen shifted his sights and decided to look at the small lives on the sphere to relax. From the asteroid incident to the present, Guo Sen has been paying attention to counting his orbital circles, and more than 30 years have passed. He was not in a hurry to see what the Birdman tribe was like, but he was a little concerned about the human tribe. The last time he saw them, one of them was eating vegetable and fruit paste and farming, and the other had all its young and strong laborers killed. Guo Sen did not interfere with them at that time, but watched their development with cold eyes. I wonder what changes they will have after so many years. Focusing his sights on the human continent, Guo Sen spent a lot of time to finally find a familiar place, the bottom of the volcano, where the group of purple-red lizardmen were. The situation here is almost exactly the same as the last time. The broken wooden fence, the steaming hot springs, the lizardmen busy bathing, the piles of dried meat, the stone guns placed randomly. It's like time has never passed in this tribe. It's the same as it was last time, and there is no change at all. Guo Sen counted the total number of lizardmen. It seems that after more than 30 years, they have increased their population a lot, and now there are a total of 600 people. Just when he wanted to shift his sights and look for the tribe of primitive people according to the direction here, he suddenly found something strange very close to the tribe. It was a team of more than 10 lizardmen, coming out of the bushes, holding bloody metal guns and swords in their hands. Dark golden light, it was indeed bronze. Just like the Birdman tribe, stained with blood. So they went hunting? But where is the prey? Is there more behind? Sure enough, a group of dirty people carrying bloody animals appeared. However, no matter how you look at it, these are those primitive people. The primitive people worked for the lizardmen? No, how could this primitive civilization have such advanced consciousness? Could it be that they are their slaves? Are the primitive people mixed up like this? Not really. But these primitive people in front of them, who looked skinny and had no spirit at all, carried pieces of meat that were much larger than themselves, with painful expressions on their faces, which clearly proved this guess. Guo Sen counted them and found a total of 23 primitive people. Judging from their size, they should be from the tribe that once had a legion. Could it be that there was another war between them? Are these people prisoners of war? With doubts, he looked behind these primitive slaves. There were also several lizardmen holding guns and swords, as if to prevent these people from escaping. The team gradually approached the tribe, and the lizardmen guards opened the gate of the tribe. After the primitive people entered the gate, they came to a bonfire in the center of the tribe, gently put down the prey and meat in their hands, and then all fell to the ground. The lizardmen opened their mouths, narrowed their eyes, and made a cackle sound. Guo Sen understood that they were laughing. Were they laughing at the harvest of prey, or at the cowardly ugliness of the primitive people? But at this moment, a lizardman waved his hand, and all the primitive people stood up again. What were they going to do? Go to the hut, where they were imprisoned, or go to work again? However, the primitive people went straight out of the lizardman's tribe, and went into the vast forest. Guo Sen was puzzled. Wouldn't the lizardmen follow? Aren't they afraid that the slaves would run away? He looked at the tribe. The lizardmen had already started to roast meat, and some were preparing to air dry some meat. Guo Sen looked at their skilled techniques and knew that at least there was a change in the past few decades. They could use fire and eat cooked meat. Then he looked at the primitive people who had entered the forest. Guo Sen watched them move away gradually along a path that seemed to be formed by frequent walking. They were not slaves. They still had freedom. Why did the scene just now happen? After thinking about it, Guo Sen understood. The primitive people seemed to have become the appendages of the lizardmen. Maybe the previous battle stimulated the nerves of the lizardmen and made them think of fighting the primitive people. Maybe the battle was not too fierce at that time, and the primitive people who had no fighting power were conquered. Did the lizardmen not kill them, but use them as a subordinate tribe and send the food they hunted as tribute? This is just the most likely guess. There should be no other explanation. Guo Sen raised his sight to find the location of the primitive tribe in his memory. It is useless to just guess, and he must go there to see if it is the case. Soon, he found the tribe of primitive people. However, something seemed wrong here. The originally tall and sturdy wooden fence is now in tatters, and many places have even been completely broken, with traces of being cut by sharp weapons. The gate that once looked beautiful and majestic is now completely destroyed. Several yawning lizardmen are standing at the door and chatting with metal spears. The dirty primitive people all look like they are malnourished, skin and bones, but they are still the same as before, weaving and smelting. Whether it is adult men and women or children who have just learned to walk, they are all working non-stop. However, no matter what these primitive people did, there were several lazy lizardmen holding weapons standing beside them, scanning them with their scary eyes from time to time. As long as they found a primitive person stopped, they would walk over and kick him down. Sure enough, this guess was true. The primitive people here have been conquered by the lizardmen and become their vassals, or even slaves. The so-called conqueror that Guo Sen thought of before. The role has now been completely reversed, and the lizardmen have become the protagonists. This is really ironic. Chapter 79. It's the same without anyone. Guo Sen looked at the current situation of these primitive people and suddenly remembered the saying, 30 years east 30 years west. The primitive people who were extremely confident in themselves rashly attacked the tribe of lizardmen. As a result, all the fighting forces were killed by poison gas. Now they were attacked by the backward lizardmen and turned the remaining tribesmen into tools and slaves. This is really an irony. Guo Sen didn't know whether this tribe, which had been ruled by lizardmen, had a chance to restore its former glory or even kill the lizardmen. But he knew very well that this was an extremely difficult thing. He counted and found that the total number of primitive people still in the tribe was less than 600. Although it had increased a lot since the last time he looked at it, it was still too few. In particular, the ratio of men to women was still extremely unbalanced. Even if these people wanted to resist, they had no capital. There were too few men with stronger strength, and the weapons they could rely on were already under the tight control of the lizardmen. Even if they had weapons, what could they do? The poison gas of the lizardmen could make them bleed to death in an instant. There was definitely no hope of survival if they fought hard. But what if they want to escape? Guo Sen searched the tribe carefully again and found that there were only 20 lizardmen who came to rule here. In addition, this place is so far away from the base camp of the lizardmen. With an absolute number of primitive people, if they want to escape, there are still some opportunities. It depends on whether they want to. Guo Sen didn't want to do anything at this time, such as freezing all the lizardmen, or throwing them dozens of kilometers away, or even killing them directly. These can't solve the fundamental problem. What if this is done? The primitive people will stay where they are, because they are used to being ruled by lizardmen and dare not even move. Wouldn't that be a waste of effort? Miracles are not something that can be waited for, but subjective will, whether they are willing to appear. If the primitive people collectively choose to escape from here, go to unknown areas, and start civilization again, Guo Sen is willing to give them some miracles. But if not, then please let them fend for themselves. There are many civilizations that can replace them as the representative race of civilization, although they look like humans. Speaking of humans, Guo Sen suddenly thought of the vegetarian tribe that ate fruit and vegetable paste. After so many years of development, what happened to them? Shifting his sights, Guo Sen carefully searched along the river according to his memory. However, he could not find the vegetables and fruits that had been planted by the river. In the fertile soil on the riverbank, there were only wild weeds growing wildly. After searching back and forth many times, Guo Sen kept confirming the location of the river, but no matter what, there was no trace of it. This is strange. Could it be that the vegetarian tribe finally gave up growing vegetables and fruits and chose to eat meat, so those fields were left barren? However, if this is the case, the tribe should still exist. But after searching for a long time again, Guo Sen still found nothing. Within a few kilometers of the riverbank, there was no trace of the existence of the tribe. Guo Sen still remembered that the people there had built a rough-looking house with stones and wood. That was. Guo Sen suddenly saw a huge rock. The grey boulder was hidden between the weeds and the shadows of the small trees. If you don't pay attention, it's not easy to find. Soon, he searched for traces of collapsed houses in this area. They seemed to have collapsed and been destroyed many years ago. Now only a few stones are left. Guo Sen realized something. This vegetarian race seemed to have encountered something serious and had to leave here, or to be more pessimistic, maybe they were all dead. He looked around. This place has been swallowed up by trees and weeds, almost destroying all traces of human activities. Plants have changed their appearance, and countless animals are rampant here. Dense insects are gnawing at everything that is left. Nature will repair itself. No matter how deep the traces of human activities are, it can't resist this existence that can almost grind away everything with time. Sighing this, Guo Sen used his ability again. He checked the scene in the soil. Nothing. He breathed a sigh of relief. I originally thought that this vegetarian tribe might have died of food poisoning or other reasons, but after searching for so long, there were only some scattered bones, and they were all left by some animals. There was only one inference left. The fruit and vegetable paste tribe seemed to have moved the tribe to another place because of something, or to put it bluntly, they ran away. They gave up the tribe they had been defending, gave up farming, gave up the shellless turtles, and all fled to an unknown place. Maybe they can survive and spread out somewhere. Maybe they encountered wild beasts or other disasters and were wiped out. Guo Sen looked at the vast sea of forests and believed that the latter was more likely. This is not the continent of sheep people and dwarves. There are endless Gobi and deserts there, and the wild beasts are far less numerous than here. It seems that the human race on this land seems to be getting harder and harder. Originally, Guo Sen was really excited when he saw the human race, but now, his mood is calm. Nature is cruel, and the law of survival of the fittest also applies to any life on the planet. We can't be too partial to them, just because they have familiar faces. A spoiled child will never be good. Guo Sen hasn't done anything for them yet, but if he has to do something, it must be what they have to do first. For the primitive tribe ruled by the lizardmen, what they have to do is resist. As long as they want to resist, Guo Sen can help them and give them some basic help. After lamenting the demise of the vegetarian tribe, Guo Sen turned his attention back to the human tribe that was regarded as hard work. He decided to observe these people for a while. If it was still like this day after day, he would immediately go to the unexplored land to look for new intelligent life. This world will not stop without humans. Night has fallen, and the fire in the tribe has been lit. It is still the same as when I left just now, and there is still no change. They are still working, even though the lizardmen next to them no longer focus on them. They are wrapped in thick animal skins, roasting fire and gnawing on dried meat. The lizardmen at the gate did the same. Some even abandoned their posts and came over to roast a fire. Alas, the lizardmen were so disorganized. Didn't these humans think of a way to resist or escape? If they really continued like this, then it would only be a matter of time before they perished. Chapter 80 The Long Wait. Guo Sen had been observing this tribe for 3 days, alternating between day and night. During this period, he also figured out the connection and rules between this tribe and the tribe of the lizard people. The lizard people seemed to be extremely interested in the pottery and weavings of this human tribe. In addition, they also asked some strong men in this tribe to form a group. to hunt on their behalf. The primitive people had the most primitive sewing technology. After grinding bones into bone needles, they twisted grass into thin ropes to sew animal skins together to form a large area of cover. After the lizard people transported these covers back to their tribe, they directly covered them on the houses to protect them from wind and rain. As for pottery, the lizard people undoubtedly liked it the most. They seemed to force the primitive people to learn to make large containers such as jars and transported them to the hot springs as tools for showering. Hunting was the only opportunity for the primitive people to come into contact with the bronze weapons. Guo Sen noticed that, although they were too few in number, they had not completely forgotten the hunting methods of their ancestors who had been dead for decades. These dozens of primitive people were equipped with spears and short swords, and they formed a square formation. Guo Sen was very familiar with this formation. Although they did not have the lightning speed of the bird people, nor did they have weapons sharper than claw blades, they were almost invincible in this formation when dealing with a small number of beasts in the forest. Soon, the primitive people encountered an opponent, a group of animals with heads like mice, but larger than piglets. It didn't take too long for the highly aggressive animals to become ghosts under the knives of the primitive people, and they didn't move. The lizard people following the primitive people came over in a swagger, picked up the animal corpses, looked at them, and waved their hands. A dozen primitive people put down their weapons and carried the prey. Of course, the lizard people would not do anything with those weapons. They ordered the rest of the primitive people to be responsible for carrying them, and they laughed and looked very relaxed. The hunting team soon returned to the tribe, but after putting down their weapons, they continued to go to the tribe of the lizard people. The hunting for these 3 days was basically the same process. During this period, some primitive people were unfortunately injured, but they were all killed mercilessly by the lizardmen who sprayed poisonous gas. As for the tribe, including the hunters, there were about 600 people in total. The lizardmen only gave them a small amount of dried meat and sent them to pick wild fruits. As a result, the primitive people's bodies became weaker and weaker. The kind of people who were originally muscular in Guo Sen's impression were now nowhere to be seen. Weaving, smelting, firing pottery and hunting. The primitive people seemed to never know how to get tired, and they were always forced to do these things by the victorious lizardmen. Guo Sen really didn't understand why the primitive people didn't resist or run away. Could it be that after these decades, the slave mentality has been deeply rooted? Are they so afraid of these lizardmen who spray poisonous gas? He decided to observe for a few more days. If it was still the same in the end, he didn't need to continue watching. If Guo Sen did anything for this human race, then his patience in the past few days was the greatest sacrifice. Time passed quickly. In a blink of an eye, 3 days passed again. It was still the same. Guo Sen felt that it was time to shift his sights and look at other lands. It seemed that for a long time here, the primitive people and the lizard people would continue their current relationship. Although he also found that the lizard people yawned more often in the past few days, the number of people who came to watch over and follow the hunting was decreasing. Guo Sen believed that, even if the lizard people only sent one person to watch over these primitive people, they would probably be scared to the point that they could not move. He raised his sight. Originally, this land was supposed to be dominated by humans. Now it seems that the lizard people with purple-red skin should be the protagonists here in the future. They have unique advantages. Even when facing a strong enemy, the poison gas will quickly kill the opponent, and there is no need to worry about how smoothly their development will be in the future. Even if they just learn to use fire and eat cooked meat, they can no longer resist the accelerated speed of their civilization. As for the primitive people, those who eat fruit and vegetable paste disappeared, and there is a high probability that they will be completely wiped out. The one in front of him became a slave who obeyed the lizard people's words, and it is only a matter of time before he dies. Guo Sen took a last look at the primitive people, who had gone out to hunt under the guard of the lizardmen, and prepared to turn his sights to the next piece of land. As if waiting for Guo Sen, the primitive people who had already taken their weapons and were ready to deal with the prey suddenly attacked collectively, while the lizardmen were absent-minded and yawning. The long spears shining with dark golden light instantly pierced the throats of 5 of the 7 lizardmen. You guys. The two lizardmen who luckily avoided the attack rolled on the ground, not expecting the primitive people to do this. They were already angry and opened their huge mouths very close to the primitive people. But the primitive people seemed to have trained similar coping skills long ago and quickly rolled on the ground and rolled far away. Kill. The long spears and long swords suddenly turned into throwing weapons and flew into the air. What? No. RRRR. The screams of the remaining two lizardmen stopped abruptly as the weapons fell. Guo Sen unexpectedly saw the result of this small battle. Before he recovered from his surprise, he suddenly felt that this scene was very familiar. This seems to be the trick of the lizard people, using weapons as javelins. History is always surprisingly similar. After killing the lizard people, the primitive people were sweating profusely, as if they had fallen into the water. They were so nervous that they seemed to be almost out of breath. They kept stabbing the bodies of the lizard people with knives and guns to confirm whether this was a dream. After a while, the hunting team of more than 20 people opened their eyes wide. After hunting only a dozen small wild animals, they quickly ran towards the tribe. Guo Sen checked and found that there were only 4 lizard people standing guard in the tribe and 2 lizard people who were interested in observing how to smelt. Now it seems that the primitive people have been waiting for an opportunity. Waiting for the opportunity for the lizard people to relax their vigilance against them. Soon, the hunting primitive people returned, but in order to hide their purpose, they tied up their weapons and carried the prey back to the tribe. This was almost the same as usual. The lizardmen guarding the gate didn't even look at the returning hunting teams and were still chatting about something. At this moment, Guo Sen suddenly saw that a dozen primitive people working next to the blast furnace suddenly melted the liquid bronze and stuffed it into the mouths of the 2 lizardmen with a shovel while they were not paying attention. The 2 lizardmen didn't even have time to scream before they were pushed into the blast furnace. At the same time, the hunting troops quickly threw away the prey and grabbed their weapons and chopped off the heads of the 4 guards who had not yet reacted with lightning speed. Chapter 81 Dream. The primitive people took advantage of the moment when the lizardmen guards relaxed their vigilance, and in a very short time, they killed all those who were oppressing them through surprise attacks. Soon, all the bodies of the lizardmen were thrown into the fire of the blast furnace and became crackling firewood. However, to Guo Sen's surprise, the primitive people did not celebrate, but gathered at the entrance of the cave in the tribe. Among them, a primitive man who was a little short and a little old faced the crowd. Guo Sen zoomed in. The tribesmen who have suffered so much bullying and suffering from those monsters. Today we finally do what we have always wanted to do, but have not done. The primitive people hugged each other tightly, and their thin bodies kept shaking. They had experienced endless pain, with a look of relief on their faces, and many of them cried softly. We killed them, this group of ugly monsters, this group of enemies who oppressed us, took away our food, snatched our clothes, and even used the weapons we made with our own hands to kill our fellow tribesmen. The old man's eyes were wide open, as if immersed in the memories of the unbearable past. Many years ago, our group of seemingly invincible tribesmen provoked those terrifying monsters. After being killed by them, they came to our tribe again. We couldn't defeat them. Couldn't defeat these monsters that could kill us even without weapons. They drove us to attack a group of tribes that we had never seen before and had almost the same faces as us. After driving them away and killing them, we thought our suffering was over, but we didn't expect that this was the beginning. After hearing this, Guo Sen finally understood why and how the tribe of the fruit and vegetable paste lovers was destroyed. That's it. We endured, we persisted, hoping that the monsters would let us go one day, but what is the truth? They are even more cruel to us. We have been preparing for a long time, and finally fought back, when they are the weakest. Chief. 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 The primitive people cheered, they had been suppressed for too long. However, we are not completely safe. When those monsters find out that we did not send the meat to them, they will definitely send everyone over and kill us with those invisible weapons. So, we must leave here immediately. Chief. We can't leave here. We should pick up these weapons and let them know how powerful we are. A very tall tribesman shouted this, and his words were also agreed by quite a few tribesmen. Guo Sen remembered that this tall man had killed 2 lizardmen while hunting, and when he came back, he killed 2 more lizardmen who were guarding. The expression on his face seemed to be extremely excited and confident. But we can't defeat those invisible weapons, Chief, as long as we don't let them get close to us, there will be absolutely no problem. The tall tribesman raised his arms and shouted again, everyone, don't you agree? Yes. The tribesmen had just killed the lizardmen who had been bullying them, and their self-confidence was unprecedentedly inflated. It seemed that a considerable number of them agreed with the tribesmen's ideas, and they were all raising their fists excitedly. But at this time, it is often the most fatal. Guo Sen watched coldly. What the little old leader said was right. What the 500 warriors couldn't do before. You old and weak soldiers shouldn't try to be brave. You actually thought that if you don't let the lizardmen get close to you, there will be no problem? I guess it's because you think that throwing spears can break the poison gas of the lizardmen. So you think so, right? You can throw spears, but others can't. Besides, the weapons in the lizardman's tribe are no longer the stone spears in the past, but the bronze spears and swords made by these primitive people. The lizardmen will not be afraid of one-on-one. Even without poison gas, the lizardmen can rely on encirclement tactics to slowly starve these primitive people to death. The lizardmen have a high food reserve, while the primitive people may not even last for 2 days. If they don't escape, they will die. If they escape, this tribe of nearly 500 people should still have hope of survival, as long as they take advanced weapons and enough food to find a place far away from here to redevelop. What will the primitive people choose? Chief, we want to fight. The tall man still didn't want to give up his idea, not to mention that many people in the tribe supported him. We want to fight. Fight the monster to the death. Why don't we attack their tribe first? The group gradually gathered beside the tall man and stood on the opposite side of the leader. At this critical moment, will stupidity defeat wisdom? Guo Sen saw that the tribesmen gradually gathered behind the little old leader. Disagreement is a big problem, but fortunately, most of the people standing behind this little old man are women and children. The future is still here. We choose to leave the leader side for the sake of the lives of all the tribesmen. We can't take risks. The number of people behind him gradually increased. Half of the tribesmen stood over. Chief, what do you mean by this? The tall man seemed to have forgotten the identity of the little old man. He still called him the chief, but his tone was different. As if infected, the tribesmen behind the tall man seemed to have also lost their authority and respect for the chief, and their eyes became strange. Like I said, we are definitely not the opponents of those monsters. It was the case in the past, and it is still the case now. The reason why they were killed by us today is also because. Killed by you? What did you do? It was obviously us who killed them. The tall man's tone became higher. He obviously didn't take the leader seriously. The leader did not answer immediately, but sighed again. It seems that we can't reach a consensus. All tribesmen, listen up. Those who are willing to leave this tribe with me and find a new gathering place, come over here. Those who are willing to fight against those monsters with him, go over there. The leader pointed his finger in the direction of the tall man with a trembling hand. He knew that he had to give up something. The tribesmen hardly hesitated. They had already fully understood the way to go. All the tribesmen chose their next life. The leader looked at the almost half of the people behind him and nodded. We take half of the food and half of the weapons. Chief, what do you mean by this? The tall man pretended to be stupid. He crossed his arms and looked at the little old man. From now on, you are the new leader of this tribe, and I, as the leader, belong to lead the tribesmen who are willing to go with me. You, what did you say? Although the tall man said this, he was very excited. At this moment, he actually got the position of leader he had always dreamed of. No more words. We have to leave quickly. Tribe members, start dividing the food. The little old leader waved his hand, and all the tribe members went to the place where food and weapons were stored. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Differences. One is the little old leader who knows that the lizardmen are not easy to mess with and is eager to lead his people away. The other is the tall man who thinks he can defeat the lizardmen and has strong self-confidence. This tribe, which had united to defeat the lizardmen not long ago, is now split into two because of the disagreement between the two. The leader's authority should be beyond doubt, but at this moment, his decision cannot satisfy the other half of the tribe. Facing the possible disaster, it is obvious that the leader's foresight and decision are more reasonable, but the tall man who killed several lizardmen does not think so. Their disagreement also divided this tribe of less than 500 people into two forces. Soon, all the dried meat and weapons were laid out. We still have to fight the lizardmen, so we need more weapons. The tall man led the tribesmen who supported him and spoke toughly. As the new leader of those people, his tone naturally became tough. Well, we'll take more food. The old chief didn't want to compromise too much. If you defeat the lizardmen, all the food in their tribe will be yours. He was eager to leave and didn't want to get entangled with the tall man. That's right, it will save you from starving to death. Although you will still starve to death, right? The tall man didn't stop him. He directed his men to move most of the weapons to their side. The little old man led the tribe without even saying a word. After taking the food and a few weapons, he turned around and walked out of the dilapidated gate of the tribe. They gathered outside the gate with less than 100 weapons in their hands, and most of the team were women and children, which formed a sharp contrast with the primitive people who stayed in the tribe, who were almost all men, holding multiple weapons. However, they didn't care too much about these, but walked into the dense forest without looking back. And the people who stayed in the tribe were not idle either. Under the leadership of the tall new leader, they roasted the raw meat they had obtained during the previous hunt, and after a big meal, they brought in a considerable amount of wood and began to repair the dilapidated places around the tribe. Guo Sen watched the group of primitive people coldly, knowing very well what would happen next. The group that escaped from the tribe in order to survive was the truly smart one. The leader of the primitive people is not necessarily the strongest one, but can also be the smartest one. The little old primitive man was obviously the latter. This person knew very well what the result would be if he went head to head with the lizard people when he was still young. The original leader and the other more than 500 people became dry bones because of overconfidence. Now that they are weaker and have fewer people, it is impossible for them to turn the tables and defeat the lizard people. But those young people in the tribe, who are full of blood and vigor, think they can win after just killing a few lizard people by luck, which is simply a foolish dream. Unexpected things will never happen in this situation. This is completely different from the situation where the lizard people sprayed poison to wipe out the primitive army. Guo Sen raised his eyes and looked at the lizard tribe. It seemed that the primitive people had not sent tribute for a long time, and they were suspicious. It's really strange. It's been so long. No matter what happened, someone should come back. You guys, take a group of people to show me what happened. The leader of the lizards was obviously completely impatient. For him, the alien tribe that had been dominated for such a long time should not have such a situation. It had never happened in the past. A dozen lizards took the order, took their weapons, and rushed towards the direction of the primitive tribe. As time passed, the leader seemed to be getting more and more restless. He walked out of the hot spring pool and paced in the center of the tribe. He thought it was really strange. You guys follow. If anything happens, run back as soon as possible. Do you hear me? The leader pointed at several men and ordered. If something happens. Several men also went into the forest. Guo Sen followed the lizardmen who were sent out and gradually approached the tribe of primitive people. In this short period of time, they have repaired the dilapidated wooden fence and started eating food. They seem to understand that the lizardmen will come to check what happened. Everyone, listen to me. If there are fewer monsters coming, we will lead them into the tribe and kill them from behind. Do you hear me? It must be said that the tall man is not without intelligence. He inherited the fighting talent of the primitive people who died decades ago, and he thinks very clearly. If they fight head on, they will definitely suffer losses. If they use tricks, it will be completely different. The lizardmen who were sent out first galloped and arrived at the outskirts of the primitive tribe in a short time. They did not find their accomplices who were guarding the door, and they stopped immediately. This is absolutely impossible. Could it be that something really happened? Several lizardmen looked at each other, and no one dared to go to the primitive tribe a few dozen meters away. It seemed too quiet inside. In the past, there would be the sound of those monster-like aliens making weapons, and smoke from blast furnaces. But now, there is nothing. After all, they have experienced many battles, and the lizards have a lot of knowledge about danger. No matter how slow they are, they will know what happened. A lizard man still couldn't believe it, and shouted in the direction of the tribe. Guai. This sound was a cry that those alien monsters couldn't make. If there were companions inside, they would definitely reply. However, there was only a lamegua inside, which was obviously not from their companions. Several lizardmen hurriedly ran back. Something happened. Even if they had the ability to spray poison, they couldn't rush in. The other side had 500 people, and it would definitely not work if they fought hard. Lizardmen are much smarter than primitive people in this regard. This is also the most fundamental reason why they were able to face more than 500 well-equipped primitive people at that time and still wipe them out. Knowing what you are good at, you know when not to act rashly. However, their running away also gave the primitive people in the tribe some strange confidence. They were scared away. Ha ha ha. The tall man laughed. He originally thought that the lizardman army was coming, but it turned out to be just a scouting team, and they were easily scared away. Although they failed to kill them, it was not completely without gain. Even if the lizardman army came next time, it would be a while later. There was plenty of time to prepare. After a while, Tanta had risen to the highest position. At the command of the tall leader, everyone completely closed the gate of the tribe. The real battle to defend the tribe was about to begin. Chapter 83, Bursting with Confidence. The second wave of lizardmen scouts did not catch up with the previous group that set out first. After encountering dozens of large wild beasts, they took a short detour in this place. Guo Sen saw that they, who were looking for the right way, passed by the previous wave of lizardmen who were rushing back at a distance of 2 or 3 kilometers. This was a 4-man lizardman team. Their main purpose was to follow the dozen or so tribesmen who had left first. In case something really happened in the primitive tribe and those people met with an accident, they could rush back to the tribe as quickly as possible. However, they underestimated the crisis awareness of their companions and did not meet them. The 4 lizardman teams left in a hurry and did not bring anything, not even weapons. After passing by the first wave of scouts without knowing it, they were rushing to the primitive tribe at the fastest speed. However, they did not have the vigilance of the previous lizardmen. Hurry, hurry, go in and see what's going on. The fastest lizardman urged the 3 companions behind him and rushed directly into the gate without paying attention to the primitive tribe that was too quiet. The wooden door was closed and the companions who were guarding the gate disappeared. And, where were the scouts before? He realized something was wrong in an instant. However, the primitive people had already seen them running. They were eager to try, with cruel smiles on their faces. These human races who decided to vent the anger of being oppressed for decades would never miss this opportunity. Projection. The tall man's roar resounded through the sky. What? The 4 lizardmen were still stunned outside the door. Before they could escape, they saw the rain of swords and guns all over the sky. The screams did not last too long. This density is not something you can hide from if you want to, especially after such a fierce run. The 4 lizardmen, just like the primitive people who were locked in the door 30 years ago, were stabbed into sea urchins with grey-green blood flowing. Hey, hey, hey. The primitive people opened the door and cheered loudly. Exclamation mark. This unexpected episode before the war brought their self-confidence to the peak. Monsters are nothing. The tall man pulled out a bronze spear from the dead lizard man and shouted in front of everyone. Nothing. Nothing. The primitive people shouted vigorously, unusually in unison. They even jumped up, as if they were dancing a strange dance. Let those cowardly guys feed the pero beast. We are the ones who should survive. We are. The tall man was extremely excited. It was his idea to kill the lizard man team during the hunting and the rest of the lizard man guards in the tribe. In a short period of time, after killing nearly 30 lizard men, his self-confidence was about to overflow. He even lost his mind and felt that as long as he was there, as long as he, the new leader of the tribe, was there, those lizard men would become corpses with grey-green blood flowing. In his opinion, the old leader who escaped with half of his people was really stupid. Even without them, wouldn't the 4 lizard men still be killed by their own side? Everyone, get ready. We want to see more corpses of monsters outside this tribe. Hey, hey, hey. All the primitive people cheered again, and then they danced a strange dance. Guo Sen looked at these, and suddenly remembered their ancestors, those unlucky people who were full of confidence, and were wiped out by the lizardmen 30 years ago. History is so similar. Is this human race born to be overly optimistic and confident? Their warlike character seems to be innate, passed down from generation to generation. Even if they are at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, even if their physical fitness is far inferior to that of the opponent, even if the opponent has more terrifying strength, they are so naive to think that they can win. Can they win? There is no point in fighting at all. If the White Wolf clan encountered this situation, they would immediately choose the same strategy as the old leader, and of course they did so. The will to fight is not something that can be inspired by blind and naive self-confidence. Only when they are in a desperate situation and have no place to retreat will they burst out with a strong will to fight. Their situation is completely different from that of the White Wolf clan. Similarly, the final result will not be a slap in Guo Sen's face like the lizardmen killed their ancestors. Guo Sen shifted his sight and found the old leader and the primitive people he led who were constantly moving forward in the dense forest. They were very smart to choose to move in the opposite direction of the lizardmen's tribe, and they changed directions from time to time, and finally arrived at a wide river. Guo Sen looked at it and found that this place was very familiar. It was near the original site of the tribe of those people in the fruit and vegetable mush tribe. However, these people did not stop, but went upstream along the river. Guo Sen looked into the distance. In the direction of the source of the river, there was a vast grassland in the dense forest. Further away, there was an undulating and extremely large hilly area. There were many rivers there, and the number of wild animals was also extremely large. There were even a considerable number of flying birds and insects. Even farther away, there were countless river valleys and basins. If these primitive people who escaped can reach there, they should be able to completely forget the horror of being ruled by the lizardmen for a long time, gradually recuperate, and finally prosper again, right? As the will of the planet itself, the most Guo Sen can do for them is to bless them. Unlike the lizardmen who completely intervened in the first land at the beginning, the White Wolf tribe and even the Dwarf tribe, Guo Sen now does not want to intervene too much. He remembered the little reds and greens that he had intervened in a long time ago. If they intervene too much or protect too much, they will not make progress. In the era of multicellular organisms, his indulgence made the organisms more colorful, and even these highly intelligent organisms in front of him appeared on the sphere. Whether to interfere or not, and how much to interfere, depends on the specific situation. Accelerating the progress of civilization is not the result that can be achieved by full intervention. Sometimes, letting it go and watching its development may be the right thing. However, specific problems must be analyzed specifically. Guo Sen turned his eyes away from these primitive people who continued to move deeper into the land along the river and came to the lizardman tribe that was ready to go. They received reports from scouts about the abnormalities in the primitive tribe. The intuitive lizardman leader understood that it seemed that the time had come to kill all the strange creatures that were originally slaves. His bulging muscles outlined extremely developed lines, and his huge mouth full of fangs also let out a war cry. We must let them know what our terror is. Group 1,092,371,091. Everyone is welcome to speak freely. Chapter 84 Improvement. The lizardmen's army almost came out in full force. They did not hold back at all. Only a few female lizardmen responsible for hatching eggs and very small lizardmen cubs were left in the tribe. After closing the gate, all the lizardmen who could fight gathered outside the gate and accepted the inspection of the leader. Holding bronze spears made by primitive people and wearing bronze long swords, every lizardman had an extremely angry expression on his face. With a big mouth full of sharp teeth, the sound of kill kept bursting out of his throat. They were full of desire to completely destroy those slaves who looked strange but now rebelled. Since they could not provide weapons, food, or even the pottery jars that were most needed when taking a hot spring bath, these slaves would be useless. Prepare weapons. The lizardman leader held the spear in both hands, and the light of the stars shone on it, shining with dark golden light. Kill. Countless spear tips were raised, cutting the breeze that blew up at some unknown time. I'm afraid our companions have already turned into corpses, and our goal is to bring them back. The leader roared. Yes. Then kill all the damn slaves who killed them. Revenge. 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 The lizardmen shouted in unison and forcefully. From their faces, one could see the cruelty and barbarity, as well as the endless murderous intent. Attack. At the leader's command, all the lizardmen lined up neatly to form a square formation. Guo Sen couldn't help but smack his lips. These lizardmen absorbed and applied it really quickly. The original formation of the primitive people has become their thing. But Guo Sen also noticed that the lizardmen even improved it a little. On the side of the lizardmen holding the spears, a scabbard-like thing was made of bark, and an extremely sharp long sword was put into it. In this way, the spear can be used at medium and long distances, and the long sword can be used at short distances. However, don't they have poison gas? Why do they have to do this? Can't they just spray it when the opponent comes for hand-to-hand combat? Could it be that this poison gas really can't be emitted continuously at will? Didn't you have such ease in the last battle with 500 primitive people? All of this is speculation. Guo Sen doesn't know whether the poison gas has such a mechanism and limitation. But now that they have long swords, the fighting power of these lizardmen must have reached a new level. And the formation does not seem to have to be a square like it is now, but will become more diverse and no longer restricted. When they invent bows and arrows, there is no limit to their potential. When he first saw them, Guo Sen really didn't expect that this group of backward lizardmen could develop into what they are now. After the backward civilization conquers the advanced civilization, it will also slowly integrate the civilization of the advanced tribe into their blood over a period of time, and eventually become their science and technology, and can also slowly improve it to become something more advanced. Guo Sen sighed in his heart. He thought of the Black Wolf tribe. When they were on that land, they subjectively believed that the Black Wolf tribe was cruel, barbaric and backward. After they seized the territory of the White Wolf tribe, they did not have any intention of civilization. At that time, he led the smaller White Wolf tribe to wipe out this race. In fact, now that I think about it, the Black Wolf tribe had an absolute advantage in population at that time, and even showed some interesting things during the battle. Even the leader of the Black Wolf tribe would use sulfur and copper ore to change the color of the flame. They actually evolved civilization to another direction, but I didn't give them the opportunity at that time. Guo Sen couldn't help but sigh. At the beginning, I seemed too immature and naive when dealing with some things. I imagined and dealt with some things from a subjective perspective, but I forgot my original intention. This also caused the destruction of the Black Wolf tribe and even the forced migration of the Dwarf tribe next to the Sheep tribe. It seems that next time I encounter an intelligent race, I must learn some experience and lessons. Not every advanced civilization should be nurtured like a nanny, and not every backward civilization should be eliminated. Partiality can be there, but it must be moderate. Guo Sen knew that he should be partial to those who are truly strong. Only in this way can he achieve his goal to speed up the evolution of civilization and reach a higher level as soon as possible. The lizard army entered the jungle. The road between the primitive tribe and this side has been completely opened up, almost a straight line. Some small trees along the way have been cut down, and the larger trees are marked with symbols of direction. This also allows the lizardmen to go to the place where revenge is needed at the fastest speed. However, Guo Sen can also see that the cautiousness in the character of these lizardmen helped them not to completely lose their minds even when such a situation occurred. Although their team was moving forward very fast, the formation was not messed up at all. Under the command of the leader, they even methodically repelled or killed some nearby beasts that were approaching. It only took a short time for these lizardmen with strong hind limbs to approach the place where revenge was needed, the primitive tribe. However, the lizardmen did not choose to attack it the first time. Under the leadership of the leader, they seemed to be holding a combat meeting. After all, the tribe opposite had a nearly 3-meter high wooden fence, and the originally damaged places had almost all been repaired. As long as the primitive people did not choose to come out, it would be absolutely impossible for these lizardmen to attack. The other party also has the skill of projectiles. The moment they approach the door, it means that they will suffer a large number of casualties. The lizardmen do not accept casualties. The population of their tribe is not that large to begin with. The mass death of young and middle-aged people has brought about the consequences. This primitive tribe has already given the best answer. They may have thought that we would take revenge, and they will also wait for us to arrive at the bottom of the wooden wall behind the solid door to die. However, we don't want to do this. The lizardman leader opened his mouth wide, as if he had already anticipated the strategy of the primitive people, and laughed. "Chief, do you mean that we should?" The lizardman next to him seemed to understand something. "That's right, bring the black fire water." The lizardman leader waved his hand, and a little lizardman holding a jar in the team came out. "Black fire water?" Guo Sen was puzzled. "What is that?" He aimed his eyes. In the jar was a dark green thick liquid that was almost overflowing. Chapter 85 Absolute Defense. Guo Sen didn't know what this black fire water was, but literally speaking, it was related to fire. What are the liquids related to fire? Oil. When Guo Sen was a human, he had never seen what the newly mined oil looked like, but now he speculated that this dark green and viscous oil should be oil. Where did this oil come from? Guo Sen was distracted, separating part of his visual system and carefully surveying the area. Soon, he found a swamp not far from the lizardman tribe. Under the swamp, there was a huge oil stratum, and there was a small area like a spring, which was slowly gushing out a very small amount of dark green viscous material. Did the lizardmen find oil? Then how will they use it? But it's not hard to guess. Turning his sight back to the lizardman, Guo Sen saw that they used the tip of the spear to pierce the oil, dipped it a little, and took it out, and put it aside. Soon, dozens of special weapons were ready. But what should they do next? They don't have a fire source in their hands now. But this worry seems unnecessary. Guo Sen saw a small group of lizardmen holding burning torches and approaching here immediately. Did they really prepare this tactic from the beginning? He turned his attention to the tribe of primitive people. The people here were also nervously preparing for the battle. It must be said that the tall leader is still quite capable. While he ordered the tribesmen to practice spearmanship, he asked the others to operate the blast furnace and continuously smelt new weapons. In Guo Sen's opinion, this leader seemed to want to give full play to the skill of throwing spears to attack the lizardmen from a distance and prevent them from approaching. Use the wooden fence with relatively strong defense as a barrier to effectively kill the lizardmen. But they never expected that the terrifying monster in their eyes had mastered more powerful skills. "Chief, the monsters are coming." A primitive man in charge of the sentry saw the figures of the lizardmen through the gap between the wooden fences. "Prepare for battle. Climb to a high place." With the order of the tall man, all the fighting forces gathered under the wooden fence. Guo Sen saw that they put some stones and wooden boards under their feet, and the height barely allowed them to stick half of their bodies out of the fence. This was probably a temporary idea, to use the skill of throwing spears to repel the lizards, right? However, the lizards stood at a considerable distance, and they did not use their secret weapons at the first time. This distance should also be the safest distance, to avoid the primitive people throwing spears. As the first inventors and users of throwing spears, the lizards probably also have a deep understanding of the maximum attack range of the spears. "Come on, two people," the lizard leader pointed to his subordinates behind him. Two thin lizardmen came out. What are they doing? Are they trying to attract the firepower of the primitive people? Or do they want to measure the attack range of the primitive people? The two lizardmen put down their weapons, even the layer of animal skin that didn't fit them, and suddenly began to move quickly in the direction of the tribe. Fire. The tall primitive man did not see through the tactics of the lizardmen. When he saw that the two hateful monsters were within the effective attack range, how could he care about anything else? Kill one less. Several spears, illuminated by the light of the stars, turned into dark golden birds. After drawing an arc in the air, they flew towards the location of the two lizardmen. However, although the two lizardmen were thin, their leg strength seemed to be extremely strong. When they saw the opponent's weapons just fly out, they immediately ran back to the back. Ding. When the tip of the spear pierced the ground, the two lizardmen had already run back to the team without even breathing. A contemptuous smile appeared on the face of the lizardman leader. Is this the maximum attack range of the thin enemy? Then, the lizardmen holding the spears dipped in oil stood up, and soon, the tribesmen holding torches lit the tip of the spear. Throw it. Let them know what real throwing is. The lizardman leader shouted, and dozens of lizardmen stepped forward quickly. The spear tips burned with fierce flames, and flew towards the primitive people. Everyone hide behind the wooden wall. Their weapons can't hurt us. The tall leader immediately gave the order. In his opinion, the absolute barrier of the thick wooden fence is definitely easy to defend, and difficult to attack. Those spears will at most fly into the tribe, and become their own weapons. After hearing the dozens of sounds of metal piercing the wooden fence, the tall man couldn't help laughing. However, Chief, fire, fire, a tribesman suddenly shouted, and the tall man was puzzled. Fire? What fire? He looked at the bonfire in the tribe and the flames in the blast furnace in the distance. Wait, this smell, how can it be so close? He raised his stiff head. The fiercely burning flames burned the absolute defense that he thought was unbreakable, the wooden wall. Flames kept coming out from the gaps between the wooden fences, licking the skin of the primitive people who had just leaned against the wooden wall, and several screams came one after another. This is impossible. He couldn't accept such a thing. What happened? Exclamation mark. The tall leader quickly found a place without smoke, and stuck his head out to see what happened. With the dozens of spears thrown by the monsters as the center, the fiercely burning flames gradually expanded their territory and gradually became one piece. Retreat. Retreat. He fell from a height, even ignoring his sprained foot, and limped to the depths of the tribe. The others also shouted, and fled in panic, and some even threw away all the weapons in their hands. The absolute barrier has been completely lost, and all the previously formulated tactics have lost their meaning. The flames devoured the wooden walls, turning them into fragile black charcoal. What can this black charcoal withstand? The tall leader looked up at the sky with desperate eyes, as if he was expecting a rainstorm to come and extinguish the sinful red that was engulfing everything. Guo Sen didn't care about that. There was no need for any unfairness in this war. The lizardman troops were waiting for the flames to completely burn the wooden wall. At the same time, they were also carefully observing the situation inside the tribe. Despite the thick smoke, the gradually broken and collapsed wooden walls also revealed some of the scenes inside. The lizardman leader was delighted to see that those hateful slaves holding spears had been frightened by their fire attack and hid deeper into the tribe. Everyone obey. Yes. Prepare to attack. Chapter 86. The end of the war. A strong wind gradually rose. The gentle breeze had turned into a strong gale, as if it was blowing a fierce war song for this war. Attack. The lizardman leader rushed to the front with two swords in hand. Attack. All the lizardmen roared loudly. They followed the leader closely and ran towards the gate of the tribe, where a blazing fire was burning. The primitive people were frightened by the fire attack. They could have taken this opportunity to throw their spears, at least killing some lizardmen, or even killing the somewhat reckless leader. However, they did not do so, but huddled in a position further inside the tribe, waving their weapons indiscriminately. Just by breaking through the gate, the primitive people lost all their courage. Their original plan was also destroyed. No, don't panic. Everyone gather. The tall leader seemed to be the only sober person here. He shouted loudly, as if he wanted the tribe members who were already in a state of confusion to obey his orders. However, the effect was minimal. However, the lizardmen were not so lucky. The oil fire was too intense, and the sudden strong wind blew the flames outward. As a result, even if they wanted to pass through, they could not do it for the time being. This also bought some time for the primitive people. Don't panic. Don't panic. If we continue like this, we will die. Stand up. Don't tremble. The tall leader kept shouting. This helped a little bit. Some tribesmen who changed their minds finally realized that if they continued to be in chaos, they would only die. If they fought hard, they would still have a chance of survival. The wind fueled the flames and accelerated the burning of the wooden walls. The lizardmen could not attack the tribe, and the primitive people had not yet fully recovered from the chaos. The battle situation temporarily entered a stalemate. However, this stalemate only lasted for a while. Most of the wooden walls that had become charred no longer had flames, and under the white ashes, there was black charcoal shining with red light. This kind of black charcoal can be completely collapsed by just poking it with a spear. The lizardmen did the same. Attack. The leader gave an order, and his men, holding spears, pushed at the black charcoal together. Boom. A loud noise was accompanied by a strong upward airflow caused by the collapse. Smoke filled the air. At this moment, the lizardmen who had not yet reacted suddenly found that countless spears suddenly appeared in the air above the smoke. What? Get out of the way. The close range attack left the lizardman leader with no chance to react, and he quickly rolled to the side. However, waves of painful screams rang in his ears almost within a second. What the hell? Damn bastard. The lizardman leader felt the piercing pain from his arm, and his pupils also reflected the figures of his tribesmen who died tragically. More than 40 unfortunate lizardmen, with dark green blood flowing all over their bodies. Some died on the spot, and some were seriously injured, and were obviously dying. The leader staggered to his feet, with a bronze spear on his arm, that had pierced deep into his flesh. In addition to the tribesmen who were seriously injured or dead, many others were also injured like him. However, unlike the fragile humans, the lizardmen did not care about minor injuries. Their powerful healing ability could quickly stop the bleeding and heal the wounds. Everyone, listen up, retreat. The leader ordered, and all the lizardmen retreated again, to a safe distance. It was also at this time that a rain of gunfire came again, hitting the place where they were before. Damn despicable monster. The leader cursed, endured the severe pain in his arm, and pulled out the spear. Without the barrier of the wooden wall, no matter how brave the primitive people were, when the flames went out, it would be their death. All the lizardmen had to do was wait, that's all. Behind the collapsed wooden wall, the roar of the tall leader inspired the tribesmen who had just won a victory with the counterattack. This unexpected attack also made the rest of the tribesmen who had not yet recovered from the chaos wake up and join the battle again. The morale was unprecedentedly high, and the primitive people raised their weapons and shouted. They once again threw weapons at the seriously injured lizardmen and killed them all. This expansion also brought them disaster. Monsters are nothing great. Let's charge. The tall leader took the lead and led all the tribesmen to rush towards the lizardmen who had not yet fully reacted and were still retreating. Their shouts shook the sky, and each one was like chicken blood. Kill. The lizardmen did not expect this group of primitive people actually came to die. Arrange the formation. Projection. The lizardman leader shouted, and all the lizardmen warriors stood in 2 parallel rows, and the long spears in their hands were thrown. Projection. The primitive tribe also roared almost at the same time. However, the lizardmen were the first to use projection after all. Their spears were fired ahead of time and thrown in front of the primitive people. After the primitive people threw them, they immediately retreated to the back. The primitive people did not think that the more they rushed forward, the faster they would die. The tall leader who rushed in the front was shot several times and staggered to the ground, turning into a corpse with his tribe. As for the lizardmen, because they retreated in time, only a few people were shot and fell to the ground, and the rest were almost fine. The primitive people's painful screams continued on this battlefield. Only dozens of people were not injured by the rain of gunfire and fled to the tribe in panic. The lizardmen did not want to leave a single person alive. Charge. Destroy them completely. The leader held the sword in one hand and shouted the battle cry again. The lizardmen killed the primitive people who were not dead yet and instantly broke through the last line of defense of the primitive people, completely blocking them in the huge cave. The primitive people inside kept coming out to surrender and beg for mercy, but none of them could finish a word before they were pierced through the body and became dead bodies. The cries of the living people kept coming from the cave, but the leader of the lizardmen did not have any more emotions. Burn it for me. The lizardmen did not want to accept any prisoners or slaves. The pain they suffered this time was deep enough. Nearly 100 lizardmen died here, which was also a heavy blow to the entire tribe. Soon, the lizardmen, who brought a large number of dry branches to block a large area of the cave entrance, poured black fire water from the jar and immediately ignited it. Thick black smoke floated into the cave. Chapter 87 The Last Survivor. Guo Sen watched coldly. He finally saw the tragic victory of the lizardmen and the corpses of the primitive people who chose to stay in the tribe, but buried nearly 300 people here. In this war, he did not intervene in anything, nor did he favor either side. The victory of the lizardmen was doomed from the beginning. In it, the primitive people once had the upper hand, but because of their overexpanded self-confidence, they were annihilated. This is very similar to the war decades ago. The winner is also the lizardman, and the one who was completely wiped out is also the primitive people. The primitive people, like their ancestors, were destroyed due to their overexpanded self-confidence and overly warlike character. However, Guo Sen did not expect that they could severely damage the lizardman tribe and kill many of them. Although the final result was as he imagined, the process was not boring. After covering the wounds of the wounded with grass ash to stop the bleeding, the lizardmen found that they had lost more than 100 tribesmen in this battle that should have been easily won. After searching the tribe again and confirming that there was no living primitive man, the lizardmen finally came to the cave. Chief. No, their number should not be so small. When the smoke in the cave had almost dissipated, a lizardman went inside to check it out, then ran out quickly, covering his nose, and reported to the leader immediately. What? Impossible. The leader was actually very surprised. The total number of corpses of all the primitive people was much different from the previous one. However, after they counted again, they found that no living primitive people were found. Chief, what on earth is this? All the lizardmen were extremely confused. This was absolutely impossible. Since the beginning of the battle, they have closed the door of the tribe. During the battle, they never ran away. Unless some of them ran away. Chase them. The leader finally realized this. He quickly ordered to chase the fleeing primitive people, but found that he had no clue. When did those people run away? Where did they run to? How can they be found in this vast forest? Forget it. Let's clean up the bodies of the dead tribesmen first. The leader called back the tribesmen he was about to find and shook his head. There are more things to do, and the losses on our side in this battle are too great. The lizardmen occupied the tribe of the primitive people and seemed to want to stay here for a while longer. Guo Sen also understood that the fight between the lizardmen and the human race had come to an end here. However, as the remaining human race that chose to leave, what happened to them? Guo Sen shifted his sights and found the river bank where he saw the group of primitive people passing by last time. That was also the original site of the fruit and vegetable mush tribe. He soon found the tribe that was still moving forward. They were still going against the river and moving deeper into the land. Under the leadership of the little old leader, this tribe might spend a long time looking for a place suitable for the development of the tribe, and then branch out and restore the tribe to its former glory. Guo Sen expected this, but there were too many uncertain factors in it. But how they will develop depends on themselves. Guo Sen, who originally wanted to help them a little, raised his sights and decided to temporarily leave this continent and go to the remaining 3 lands to find more intelligent life. However, he suddenly found something strange in the delta where the big river flows into the ocean. He zoomed in and looked carefully at the strange things that seemed familiar and attracted his attention. There were dozens of unusually square dark plots in the fertile soil beside the river. On them, neatly arranged plants and fruit trees grew. Guo Sen suddenly understood something. There is only one hypothesis to explain this kind of thing. The fruit and vegetable paste tribe still exists. Did they come to the delta at the bottom of the river from the original river? Guo Sen originally thought that these people fled to the dense forest. Maybe they were attacked and devoured by wild beasts, or they might die in various possible emergencies, but he never thought that they could even run so far away from their hometown. But are these really those people? Didn't the old man leader say that he had been driven by the lizardmen to attack those people? Guo Sen zoomed in further and scanned everything around him carefully. Soon, he saw some simple houses hidden in the shadow of the tree canopy and built between branches in the jungle by the river. The roof and walls were made of branches as thick as arms and then tied with ropes made of grass. The hole was not very big, but it was indeed safe enough to be built on these trees a few meters high. The dense canopy also had enough conditions to shelter from wind and rain. Apart from being a little shabby, these tree houses did not have many disadvantages. Guo Sen thought of the red-haired apes on the continent before. They also lived in tree houses, but relatively speaking, the one in front of him was much more beautiful. However, it seemed quiet here, and when he looked into the house, there was no one. He checked all the tree houses. He had just seen that no one was farming in the fields outside, and the same was true inside the house. Only charcoal with sparks was left, proving that there were people not long ago. Where did they go? Could it be that they are all dead? No, if that were the case, the cultivated land along the river bank would not be as free of weeds as it is now. The houses would not be so neat, and the fire would not have charcoal. Guo Sen carefully searched the nearby forests and grasslands. Soon, he found a large group of humanoid creatures moving in the nearby grasslands. However, unlike his impression, these people's bodies did not seem to be fat and bloated. Now they looked like the primitive tribes before, thin and with some muscles. Now, they seemed to be doing something that Guo Sen had never thought of before. Hunting. They clumsily surrounded a beast that looked like a cow, which did not run very fast, but had 2 fangs and 3 long horns on its head. They held stone spears in their hands and kept shouting. Shrink. Shrink. An old voice shouted, as if giving orders. Guo Sen carefully identified his appearance and found that he was the tribal leader he had seen before. He used to be as fat as a bull, but now he is so thin that he looks unrecognizable. All the hair on his head has fallen out, but you can still see his original appearance. All the primitive people further narrowed the encirclement and surrounded the 3-horned monster. Projection. Guo Sen heard this term again. At the same time, hundreds of stone spears flew out together. Chapter 88 Leap Development. The stone spears were not sharp, but if hundreds of them were thrown together, the power would be enough to kill this horned animal that was about the size of a cow. After all, it could be killed by smashing it. Guo Sen was still very relieved. This group of primitive people who only knew how to eat fruit and vegetable paste finally changed their minds. Eating meat, that's right. If they were purely vegetarian, what are they doing? Guo Sen looked at these primitive people gathered together in confusion, then took out the stone blade, squatted down and began to skin and bone the animal that had been pierced like a hedgehog. Do it here? Don't move to the tribe. Aren't you afraid of other wild animals? They moved quickly, and Guo Sen saw them cut off a lot of meat and knocked off the bones and the 3 nearly 1 meter long horns and 2 fangs that he had seen before. Do you know that this can make all kinds of things? This is a lot of progress compared to the civilization they showed before. They can actively hunt, eat meat, and may even make something with those sharp horns. Guys, keep an eye on you. But Guo Sen watched them remove all the bones and pull out the tendons and the meat. They only carried these away and threw the meat aside. Shit, what's going on? I said they forgot about the meat. This army of more than 300 people had no interest in the meat at all. They happily carried the meat and walked back. Guo Sen was speechless. You guys haven't changed. His eyes followed them closely, and the pieces of meat that had been cut and discarded were targeted by a group of birds in the sky and small carnivores lurking nearby. The 2 sides started fighting again. The primitive people collectively returned to the direction of the tribe. Guo Sen saw that they soon came to the river and began to carefully clean the bones, horns, and fangs of the animals. After a while of scrubbing, they returned to the fire under the treehouse. The animal bones were broken into dozens of pieces. They placed the widest front and rear leg bones separately. A female primitive was responsible for tying a straw rope on one end of each bone to make a weapon similar to a wooden stick. Small bones such as ribs were pulled out and carefully ground on stones. The tips gradually became sharp. After one end was tied with a straw rope, they became short and easy to collect bone blades. As for large bones such as spines and skulls, they were placed in a place with strong sunlight. Guo Sen guessed that they would deal with them later. The tendons pulled out of the meat were a sticky and tough ribbon-like object. The primitive people put it on a flat stone slab and beat and hammered it hard, as if it had another use. As for the 2 fangs and 3 long horns, someone was constantly grinding them, and it was not clear what they were going to do for the time being. However, when he saw that some primitive people began to cut down thin branches and used stone blades to cut them into long sticks with sharp tips, he finally understood what they were going to do. They were going to make bows and arrows. The fangs and horns may be the bow body, and the tendons may be the bowstrings. However, this is just a guess. Guo Sen decided to observe for a few more days. The fruit and vegetable porridge lovers, just like they had seen before, went to the mud by the river to plant crops, harvest fruits, and then cook fruit and vegetable porridge repeatedly. During this period, the tendons were gradually hammered and became stronger and more elastic. They connected the tendons to the curved horns and fangs and successfully made 5 bow bodies. Standard process. And the shape is extremely beautiful, and the curvature is just right. No, when did they have this consciousness of making bows and arrows? In just over 30 years. It shouldn't be mastered so quickly, right? This is a bit strange. It was good enough for these fruit and vegetable porridge lovers to make stone blades and stone guns. After all, for them who eat vegetarian food, these things are almost useless. And the bow and arrow are even more unreasonable. Technology can't develop leaps and bounds in a short period of time, right? Think about the other primitive tribe. They don't have bows and arrows, not to mention the lizardmen. Think about it carefully. The only races with bows and arrows that I have seen so far, besides the white wolf tribe, is the birdman tribe I saw last time. Could it be that there are these 2 races nearby, and the fruit and vegetable paste lovers have learned their production skills? Guo Sen raised his sight and looked at the land where the white wolf tribe and the birdman tribe were. They are both quite far away from here. In this backward primitive civilization, it is impossible to pass technology here. Could it be that these fruit and vegetable paste lovers have figured it out by themselves in just a few decades? In Guo Sen's mind, the existence of this primitive tribe is a paradox. Seeing that they have developed mature bow and arrow making skills without a teacher in just a few decades, he can't understand it even more. In his opinion, it should be a long process for bows and arrows to go from nothing to something, and they will go through countless improvements before they have the current shape. However, they only took a few decades. This doesn't make sense anyway. Guo Sen began to carefully search all the land from the original residence of the fruit and vegetable paste tribe to the present place. If they had defeated any tribe, then the appearance of this bow could be explained. However, Guo Sen searched almost every inch of land on this continent and found no signs of any intelligent creatures except this tribe, the lizard tribe, and the primitive people who were still moving deeper into the land. This became a mystery. Could it be that the brains of these guys who only eat fruit and vegetable paste have evolved rapidly in the past 30 years because of some opportunity and invented the bow themselves? With endless questions, Guo Sen continued to pay attention to them for nearly half a year, trying to find even a trace of clues, but still found nothing. In the end, he could only raise his sights and divert his attention. There are still 3 pieces of land that have not been explored. You can't always focus on one land. The closest place to here is a continent with countless lakes and rivers, dominated by mountains and grasslands. Compared to other places, there are many islands here, some of which are even frighteningly large, with towering peaks. However, a considerable area of this land is between the frigid zone and the temperate zone, and in terms of temperature, it is not very suitable for the survival of humanoid creatures. The tropical and subtropical areas are very small, and basically because of the existence of cloud-like plateaus in those areas, the temperature is estimated to not be much higher. But nothing is absolute. Before Guo Sen carefully examined the grassland area that occupied the largest area of this land, he saw groups of black shadows constantly moving in and out between the forest and the grassland. He immediately focused his attention on these creatures that were obviously upright humanoids. However, these people are they a little too big? Today, 2 updates are assumed. Thank you for your continued support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Subjective Cognition. In Guo Sen's cognition, the concept of giant only stays on a basketball superstar. Even on his sphere, the tallest he has ever seen is the lizardman leader, who is about 2 meters and 5 or 6 meters tall. And the humanoid creatures with limbs and heads and reddish brown skin that appeared in front of him are all over 3 meters tall. Not only that, they also have strong and well-developed muscles. Just looking at the strong lines outlined by those muscles, it feels like a synonym for violence and destruction. The appearance of these giants is actually not much different from the primitive people they have seen before, but except for the eyes, the mouth, nose, and ears seem to have been enlarged several times with this head. However, unlike the primitive people with dense hair, these guys don't have a single hair on their heads, and they don't have any beards either. Maybe because of their huge bodies, the movements of these giants can really be called slow. They hold the trunks with branches, pulled off in their hands, and step by step towards the grassland or forest. There are about 50 of them in total. Guo Sen watched them carrying with non-stop, and suddenly remembered an idea he had before. The giants. This is another element similar to the fantasy style. He still can't understand why so many similar creatures have evolved on his sphere. He can only say that this is a probability, a very low one. He also thought that maybe before humans became the dominant species on Earth, there might have been races similar to lizardmen or dwarves and the giants we see today. However, this is just a guess after all. Guo Sen seemed to be a little numb. Now he would not be surprised if any strange race appeared. At this moment, the soil at the feet of the giants suddenly bulged into a large bag with a diameter of several meters. Then, dozens of large bags bulged one after another, forming a long chain. A giant didn't stand firm and fell directly to the ground, and a large bag next to him suddenly burst, and several strange things came out of it. Is that a bug? Guo Sen saw that the long creature, which was 2 meters long and almost covered with a layer of brown carapace, had 4 pairs of strong arthropod-like feet and a thin layer of whiskers covering its entire body. It had 2 pairs of black bean-like eyes with 2 antennae, and below it was a mouth that split into 3 petals. In that mouth, there were thousands of triangular sharp teeth. The giant who fell to the ground was also frightened when he saw the insect that suddenly appeared. He didn't get up directly, and the insect flew directly from the hole. Whoa. The giant suddenly twitched all over, his limbs kept shaking, and even the sound of his screams became discontinuous. Seeing this, the 2 giants next to him hurried over to grab the insect and pull it off their companions, and they screamed at the same time. Was it stabbed? However, if it was stabbed, would the screams be so intermittent? However, more bugs also came out of the soil, and soon, they pounced on the 2 twitching giants. Guo Sen also saw that the tails of those bugs that were not covered by shells were in a strange spiral shape, and some blue twisted lines kept coming out from there and entering the bodies of the giants. Seeing this, the other giants quickly swung the giant trees in their hands and rushed over to hit the strange bugs. But strangely, the strange bugs fled to the side before the giant trees fell, and these giant trees hit the fallen giants firmly. The critical hit brought by the powerful explosive force also severely injured the companions in an instant. For a while, blood foam splashed, and wood chips shattered. The bugs that fled to the side quickly drilled into the cave and disappeared. Oh. The giants roared in pain. They picked up the giant trees stained with blood and stabbed them into the giant hole. But this was in vain. Those bugs had no idea where they had run to. The giants vented their anger and kept smashing the giant trees into more holes. At this moment, several mounds of earth suddenly appeared under the 3 seriously injured giants, and then the bugs ran out and began to bite frantically with their strange and disgusting mouths. The 3 giants screamed for the last time and finally stopped struggling. Seeing this, the giants who were still standing seemed to understand their situation. They screamed and kept retreating. Waving the giant trees, their emotions gradually changed from anger to fear. The bugs came out of the holes one after another, arranged in 2 straight lines, gradually moving forward, and the giants kept retreating. The movements of the bugs were uniform, as if they had been rehearsed in advance. In Guo Sen's cognition, there would be no such thing as tactics for bugs. Even if they went to eat food, they would grab it in various ways. They would never line up in a straight line and would not make full use of their own advantages to attack the enemy that was so much larger than themselves. Whether it was the sudden attack at the beginning, or the electric discharge attack, or the rapid retreat when the enemy attacked, or the killing of the prey when the opportunity arose, or even the formation in the end. Could it be? No, it shouldn't be possible, right? According to normal thinking, how could it be possible for insects? But what just happened? Is there any other explanation? Excluding all the errors, the remaining answer, no matter how absurd, is the truth. Insects have wisdom. Guo Sen still couldn't believe it, but there was no other answer to what had just happened. The giants finally gave up the bodies of their companions and turned to run deep into the forest. And those insects seemed to have been paused by someone, and they didn't move in place. A roar sounded. Guo Sen saw that a huge mound of earth suddenly appeared next to the bodies of the giants, and then a very ugly thing came out of the mound. The thing gradually got out of the mound and finally successfully came to the ground. This big insect looked completely different from the ones just now. It had a larger body, longer tentacles, and a terrifying mouth split into 3 petals. Countless translucent round balls covered its red back, which was not covered with a shell. They were so dense that it was impossible to count whether there were thousands or more. There seemed to be some small black things crawling inside, and they were shaking with the movement of this huge monster. The 2 pairs of black bean-like eyes of the big insect swayed left and right. It quickly crawled to the 3 corpses beside it, and bit the corpse of one of the giants into pieces in an instant. Dark red blood dripped from its mouth. After a few seconds, it bit the second corpse and swallowed it. During this period, the previous insects were still motionless like before. Guo Sen was a little surprised. This was really incomprehensible. At this time, the big insect suddenly drilled into the cave again, and the small insects seemed to be untied and moved again, crawling onto the body of the last remaining giant. Chapter 90 Dominant Consciousness. The giant's body was soon submerged by a sea of black insects. Within a few seconds, the insects scrambled to eat the prey and ate it cleanly, leaving not even a bone. They soon scattered again and finally burrowed into the cave. A breeze blew, blowing the weeds away. All that was left at the scene was bloodstains soaking the soil and countless terrifying circular pits. If Guo Sen hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he really couldn't understand what had just happened. The intelligent insects killed and preyed on the huge giant in just a short time. The strange and bizarre behavior that happened to them also fascinated Guo Senator. Why can they be so comfortable and skilled, treating hunting as a set program? Why did they stand still when the big insect appeared and devoured the food just now? Guo Sen searched in the soil. He felt that there seemed to be some secret hidden in it. For him, searching for things in the soil and rocks is much easier than in the woods, grasslands, or even the ocean. Soon, he found a huge space more than 10 meters underground. This space is connected to the ground through dozens of tunnels. The protagonist just now was motionless in this hole of thousands of square meters that seemed to have been dug out, just like before. Guo Sen saw that the big worm was at the deepest part of the cave at this time. It didn't know when it dug a big pit and lay on it. At this time, it was shaking constantly, and I didn't know what it was doing. Looking closely, transparent spherical objects were constantly produced from the lower abdomen of this disgusting guy. Did it lay eggs? Those spheres are undoubtedly insect eggs, just like those on its back. The eggs piled up layer by layer, gradually covering the deep pit. Is this big worm a female worm? Guo Sen looked at this ugly guy. After it laid eggs, its abdomen was also held back, and the whole thing shrank a lot like a deflated ball. At this time, the rest of the insects were still motionless, as if they were frozen. This was too weird. After the mother insect finished laying eggs, she continued to lie on top, with her pair of long antennae shaking constantly. At the same time, the antennae of the rest of the insects were also shaking at the same time. Then, the insects moved to the walls of the cave, using their well-developed mouthparts to dig up the soil in an orderly manner, just like a machine. Guo Sen looked at the soil gradually piled up beside them, and fell into deep thought. He had just looked at all the underground areas of the entire continent again. In addition to this place, there are really a few places with insect groups that are almost the same as here. Their common feature is that they all have a huge insect as the mother insect, and the rest of the insects seem to be completely obedient to the mother insect, and there are also situations like just now where they are motionless. But why is this? Guo Sen observed carefully. He found that after the insects dug a hole that could accommodate them, they suddenly stopped moving, while the antennae of the mother insect kept swinging in various ways. Hey, could it be that the little bugs crawled out of the hole, their antennae trembling, and then, as the mother insect changed the position of its antennae again, they began to spread the excavated soil near the hole. So that's it. Does the mother insect command the little bugs through its antennae? But what about the actions that were almost made at the same time? Wait. Guo Sen suddenly remembered a term. Cluster consciousness. Or it can also be called dominant collective consciousness. It means that many individuals receive the main consciousness through the medium, emitted by a single individual, and make it the shared consciousness of the individuals. If this is the case, the various strange and bizarre behaviors of these bugs can be understood. Things like suddenly not moving, dividing the work in an orderly manner, and operating like a machine, attacking, harassing, and defending, and even standing in 2D rows are all cluster consciousness. And the medium that conveys this consciousness should be the antennae between them. Guo Sen felt that after the antennae rubbed against each other, they must have conveyed some special biological information, so the mother insect could completely control the little bugs, let them receive cluster consciousness, and do things similar to what they did just now. However, this is just a hypothesis with a relatively high probability. In the 5 underground caves with strange insects on this land, there are a total of 5 mother insects with almost the same appearance, but the total number of small insects in all the underground caves is less than 500. This seems to have created a paradox with the large number of eggs just laid by the mother insect and the number of eggs on its back that are about to hatch. Why are there so few eggs when it is so fertile? Time passed slowly, and neither the mother insect nor the small insects moved anymore, as if they were asleep and motionless. Guo Sen was a little bored, and he didn't know what to do if he continued like this. Just when he wanted to divert his attention and observe and look for those giants, he suddenly noticed that something seemed to be approaching here at an abnormal speed in the nearby soil. When the thing was about to approach this cave, it suddenly slowed down its forward speed, and even the amplitude of its movements was greatly reduced, and the sound of digging the soil became extremely slight. Guo Sen carefully observed the creature in the soil, and felt that it looked a little strange. At first he thought it was a bug, but when he looked more closely, he found that this creature covered with scales only had 4 legs and a tail, and was less than 2 meters long. Their front and rear limbs were abnormally strong, and the front fingers of the 5 claws had long claws like sharp knives, which were sharp and thick, like a cone. The tip of the hind claws was flat and wide, like a shovel. This is almost tailor-made for digging. The front claws only need to scrape the seemingly tough soil lightly, and the hind claws quickly swing to push the scraped soil to the back, and finally use the slender tail to sweep the soil to both sides of the cave wall. Their heads are huge, almost accounting for a quarter of the body, with a long face like a cone, and in front of the slender eyes is a black moist small nose that opens and closes. Guo Sen always feels that this thing is very similar to a creature on Earth, the pangolin. However, pangolins are not so huge, and are their heads so big? Guo Sen thinks it is more appropriate to call them big-headed monsters. What are they doing here? Guo Sen saw them, and their slight movements pushed aside the last layer of soil between them and the insects, but they did not come out immediately. He sniffed around with his pointed nose. He looked at where all the holes were pointing, and suddenly found that they were all gathered on the side of the mother insect. Could their purpose be? Chapter 91 Special Hunting Techniques. The purpose of the big-headed monsters is now seen in this way. It is basically certain that they are not trying to sneak attack the insects and eat them, but the eggs behind the mother insect and under it. Guo Sen thought about it, and found that this is understandable. Almost all things related to eggs represent extremely rich nutrition. These nutritious insect eggs can be regarded as a supreme delicacy in this underground. Guo Sen saw that the big-headed monsters stayed quietly for a while. They seemed to be waiting for the best time. On the mother insect's side, it seemed that something sticky was secreted on its back. It just rolled over lightly, and the eggs that had just been laid in the pit covered its back, layer after layer, densely packed. After doing this, the mother insect lay in the pit again, and after laying some more eggs, she fell on it tiredly, and did not move. And the big-headed monsters seemed to be waiting for this moment. However, unlike what Guo Sen imagined, these guys actually lay at the entrance of the cave, and stuck out their tongues. This is 2 or 3 meters away, what are you licking? However, the extremely long and thin tongue kept stretching forward, until they touched the translucent spherical eggs. Damn, this is amazing. The tongue is only 2 or 3 meters long? What kind of structure is it? Guo Sen was amazed. This guy is amazing. After the big-headed monsters rolled up the eggs with their tongues, they gently exerted force. The eggs were pulled out of the back of the mother insect in a sticky, glue-like long thread, without any sound. In the silent space, the big-headed monsters quietly rolled the eggs into their mouths. However, Guo Sen also noticed that they did not eat the eggs directly, but wrapped them all in their mouths, which made the skin on both sides of their mouths bulge. After a while, the eggs that were about to hatch on the back, and the white ones that were laid before were almost picked up by these big-headed monsters, leaving only a few near the head of the mother insect. The big heads were not satisfied with this, but continued to use their long tongues to reach into the pit and roll up more newly born eggs. At this moment, the mother insect suddenly moved. It turned around in an instant, opened its 3-petal mouth, and rushed towards the direction of the cave, where the big-headed monsters were hiding. Boom. After a loud noise, a large amount of dust raised by soil and gravel filled the entire cave. However, Guo Sen found that the big-headed monsters were much faster than the mother insects. They quickly drilled back into the tunnel, and then fled in the direction they came from. The mother insect was so angry that she continued to hit the tunnels, and even the remaining eggs on her body fell to the ground and were pressed into a pool of water by her huge body. Those small insects also joined the battle, but in the smoke and dust, it seemed that the dominant consciousness was not too stable. Several small insects were hit by the mother insect and instantly became corpses. Now, Guo Sen finally understood why there were only so few of these insects with super strong reproductive capacity and strong combat power. The role of the big-headed monsters cannot be ignored. As the natural enemies of the bugs, they ensure their own nutrition and food needs by stealing insect eggs, which, to a large extent, prevents the bugs from further expanding their population. If there were no such guys, I believe that with the reproduction ability of the bugs, it would not take too long for the entire continent to be their territory, right? Guo Sen's sight left the mess of bugs, and followed the big-headed monsters. Following them along the tunnel, Guo Sen finally came to a not very wide underground space. However, he discovered an unusually familiar and novel phenomenon. The blue-white light enveloped the entire underground space, and the stone walls covered the glowing moss that he had seen before in the sheep tribe. However, compared to that side, the moss here seemed to be more widely distributed and more luxuriant. The big-headed monsters that were seen before, after coming out of the tunnel, gathered together again. Then, something happened that made Guo Sen extremely strange. They actually raised their front legs, supported themselves with their tails, and then stood up again with their hind legs. Damn, wait, what's going on? Aren't you crawling? What the hell is it with your hind legs standing upright? No way. Guo Sen saw them walking towards another relatively wide tunnel in the underground space, and after walking a short distance, they came to an unusually wide place. This huge space, which is cone-shaped as a whole, is located in the center of a small mountain. Like the small cave seen before, the walls here are also covered with mosses that can emit blue and white light, making this space as bright as day. Several narrow underground rivers flow slowly through this space that is as big as a dozen football fields, and there are countless small shadows swimming very fast. Among the nearly 100 small houses built of stones and mud, more big-headed monsters come and go. There are even dozens of fires in the center of the cave. Guo Sen knew that his guess was right. The big-headed monsters are really an intelligent race. How can I be so lucky that I actually encountered 3 intelligent races in a row? Guo Sen also regarded the insects with collective consciousness as an intelligent race. Although they did not show even a little bit of human-like appearance, their wisdom in fighting giants was not something that the brains of insects could think of. The big-headed monster hunters with a large number of insect eggs in their mouths came to the central area of the residential area. They gathered together and then spit the eggs from their mouths into the ground. Guo Sen saw that some of the insects' eggshells seemed to have broken and the small insects staggered on the rocks. The big-headed monsters picked up the stones, picked up these directly, and threw them into the fire together with the unbroken shells to roast. Small big-headed monsters came out of each house and came to the fire, waiting for the moment when the food was roasted to the point of burning and sizzling with oil. Guo Sen watched all this silently. He counted and found that there were nearly 400 big-headed monsters who were all chewing on the fragrant roasted insect eggs. The number of these insect eggs was very limited. Even if each one could provide a lot of calories, it was not enough for these guys. It is estimated that in addition to the insect eggs, the big-headed monsters have other food sources. He turned his attention to the other 2 insect caves he had discovered before. There seemed to be big-headed monsters nearby. It seems that the eggs of the insects should be the staple food of the big-headed monsters. Otherwise, they would not build their nests so close to the insect caves. But there is also one thing that is very strange. Why don't these insects find other places to avoid these big-headed monsters? Chapter 92 Precious Metals. Guo Sen suddenly wanted to change the names of these creatures that were already confirmed to be intelligent. The name Big Head Monster was too vulgar and ugly. How about armored orcs? They had large scales covering almost their entire bodies, and they looked like they were covered in armor, although that thing didn't seem to be very hard. But it was better than being called digger orcs or digger orcs, right? Guo Sen saw that these armored orcs seemed very satisfied after eating the roasted insect eggs. After they got up, they walked slowly towards the stone houses. The whole group of people were lazy and seemed to have no desire for anything. Guo Sen glanced around and found that there were no woven fabrics, pottery, or even animal bones. The armored orcs did not make weapons such as stone guns, let alone the desire to hunt other animals. Guo Sen noticed that in addition to eating insect eggs, they seemed to store a considerable number of plant tubers in a slightly larger house. As soon as he realized it, the thing that was as big as a human head was torn into several pieces, and a large amount of juice fell down, but the inside was strangely purple. It seems that this is another main food for them. Guo Sen searched around and found that there were a lot of similar things growing in the land near the river outside the mountain, and there were indeed a few armored beastmen digging them hard. Digging with metal tools. He thought he was seeing things for a moment, but when he looked closely, wasn't it a metal tool that was shining with gold under the light of the stars? At first, Guo Sen thought it was dark golden bronze like the bird people and primitive people, but when he looked closely, the color of this tool made into a short knife seemed to be brighter. Could it be gold? He checked the nearby geology and suddenly found that this hollow mountain contained a lot of gold ore. Unlike the ores on the earth with very low gold content, the ores here are almost all high quality gold ores of the size of dog head gold. Could it be that this was once a relatively dense meteorite bombardment point? Guo Sen checked and found that there were indeed traces of the huge impact in ancient times at the bottom of the stratum. However, do these armored orcs really know that gold is a precious metal, or do they just mine it as a tool because they think the color is beautiful? Some armored orcs rested in the stone house for a while, then took their tools and went to an area with more gold, or that Guo Sen had just checked, and started working. However, unlike what he imagined, Guo Sen found that the tools used by the armored orcs to mine gold were not gold, but iron tools that he had seen in the dwarf tribe before. Do they have advanced iron smelting technology? However, think about it, if they can even make tools with gold, iron smelting is nothing. He checked again and found that there was a rough smelting factory by the river not far from the armored orcs who were collecting plant tubers. There were also quite a lot of people busy there. Guo Sen took a quick look and found that their iron smelting technology seemed to be inferior to that of the dwarves. The iron blocks they produced contained quite a lot of impurities, but they had everything, such as blast furnaces and forging tables. The difference from the dwarves was that even their forging tables were made of iron, and they were full of details. Many places were carved with patterns and decorated with gold wire. It seemed that in the cognition of the armored orcs, gold seemed to be more decorative. Then, Guo Sen really found a lot of unbladed knives made of gold and rings that looked like crowns. It was exactly what he thought. As for the smelting of gold, Guo Sen also saw that they just melted the doghead gold in the blast furnace, poured it into a rectangular mold that seemed to be made of iron, and let it take shape naturally, turning it into thin gold bricks, and then hammered and polished it into various shapes. It seemed that they had a very high understanding of gold in this regard, compared with other races. Guo Sen suddenly thought, what should the civilizations on this sphere use as currency in the future? Gold, silver and the like existed as the most important precious metals in the ancient times on Earth. In modern times, they have become currency reserve assets and play an important role in this field. Will the armored orcs, who first discovered gold, turn it into a kind of currency and use it widely in the future? Guo Sen remembered that in the history of currency on Earth, the earliest things that appeared were natural marine shells as general equivalents, followed by various precious metals. However, the most basic barter of these civilizations on the sphere only existed between the sheep people and dwarves on that continent, and they were destroyed by themselves. As for other races, there is not even any budding that has begun. Currency, a more advanced exchange, is far from being able to take the stage. If that time really comes, I guess the armored orcs may become the richest race. Their civilization is actually very simple, relying on the large amount of eggs produced by the queen worm as the main food, and then planting the purple tuberous plants as supplementary food. They feed this small tribe of hundreds of people. Apart from smelting, this race has nothing to praise in other aspects. If there is anything that can make Guo Sen's eyes light up, besides their long tongues, it is the development and practical use of gold. If he wants to interfere with their civilization, he thought about it, and there is really nothing to do, because it seems that other things are of no use to them. Weapons? These guys don't even have enemies. Hiding inside the mountains, no one can find this place unless there is something wrong with them. Guo Sen has never seen weapons such as stone guns. If he hadn't seen the golden knives they made, he would probably have strong doubts about whether they know what weapons are. This is also the ironclad evidence that they can't find the enemy at present. However, the ability to make knives also proves that they have made related things before encountering this nutritious insect egg. Otherwise, this cannot explain their appearance. Guo Sen thought about it and decided to go and see what kind of civilization the giants have, and then take the time to see if there are any other places worth paying attention to in the armored orcs and other areas. However, before he moved his eyes away from the smelter, he saw a visitor with red skin very close to it. Chapter 93, Puzzling. Guo Sen has now become able to face these emergencies calmly. Even if they happen with extremely rare probability, he will not be as surprised as at the beginning. The huge black shadow with red skin can only be the people of the planet he just wanted to visit, the giants. According to previous experience, Guo Sen felt that their purpose of appearing would definitely not be peace. After all, judging from their extremely powerful appearance, they can only represent destruction and slaughter. What's more, these giants still have a lot of traces of blood on their bodies, and they also hold wooden sticks cut from thick wooden stakes in their hands, which are also wrapped with gold wire. Gold wire? Guo Sen looked at the armored orcs who were still doing what they had to do just now, even after seeing the giants, and suddenly understood something. The relationship between the two races is not that of enemies, nor is it the kind of encounter that happens by chance. Guo Sen looked at the giants who stopped and sat down outside the smelter again, and found that the ones behind them seemed to have a lot of beast corpses on their backs. The blood on their bodies and wooden sticks should be from this. They also carried a huge bag that looked like it was made of the skin of some beast. I don't know what was inside. Several armored orcs came out of the tunnel next to the smelter and came to the waiting giants. No matter how you look at it, there is no sign of fighting between them. Guo Sen confirmed his guess. It seems that there has always been a trade between the two races. As expected, Soon, Guo Sen saw the giant sitting in front of him waved his hand, and the giant behind him stood up and put the corpse of the beast on his back and the huge bags in front of the armored orcs. The armored orcs took some dazzling things from the smelter, a golden knife, a ball of gold wire, and a small golden ball that was hammered and polished. Just now, Guo Sen thought that it was too early for gold to become a currency, but now it has immediately become an important role in barter. After seeing the gold, the giants immediately grinned and pushed the things they brought to the armored orcs. Guo Sen's mind moved. This is women's Liwu and red redstone. The leading giant opened his mouth and stammered out this sentence. You are two different races. Why do you have to say this sentence? Can the other party understand? Is this giant really very intelligent? This is what you like in exchange for your prey and redstone. The leading armored orc stuck out his thin tongue and nodded at them. Rich. Then, after you take these, you can leave. The armored orc pointed to the gold products and said, rich. Damn. Guo Sen originally thought that he would not be easily surprised, but now this situation still scared him. They can talk. Are you kidding? These are two completely different races. What happened that they can talk? Guo Sen closed his mind. He heard the hissing sound from the armored orcs and the not so continuous hissing sound from the giant. Now, he was even more uneasy. It would be fine if the armored orcs could make the giants ho-ho sounds, but why did they learn the language from the stupider giants? What was going on? There were too many unexpected things, and Guo Sen couldn't even accept it for a while. It was barely acceptable for the two races to talk to each other, but the one who learned a foreign language was a giant. This was really fucked up. The things this time are very good. We accepted them, and please keep these. The armored orcs first counted the prey, and then opened a huge leather bag. Guo Sen saw that the things called redstone inside were, as expected, iron ore. No wonder Guo Sen didn't find any easy to mine iron, or when he searched this area before, but the armored orcs still had so many iron tools. Let's go. Wait until you get the next one. The next one. We will definitely prepare what you want. Please rest assured. The armored orcs pointed to the gold that had been held in the palms of the giants' hands and stuck out their long and thin tongues. Heyo. The giants were satisfied with their hands holding the beautiful things they had exchanged for so many things, put them into the leather bags that had just put the iron ore, and strode away again. They gradually disappeared in the jungle, and the vibrations from their heavy footsteps became smaller and smaller. Many armored orcs came out from the tunnel, and they began to carry animal meat and heavy iron, all together in an orderly manner. Looking at the busy scenes of these big-headed monsters who had been busy, Guo Sen became more interested in the giants who left. The appearance of these giants was exactly the same as those who were attacked by insects before, but the performance of the two groups of people could be said to be very different. The ones who were holding the giant trees before were as stupid and dumb as they looked, and were even played around by the insects, while these giants were holding finely polished wooden sticks wrapped with gold wire in their hands, and they could even communicate and trade with the armored orcs of foreign races. The difference between them was really a bit too much. Why did this happen? Guo Sen decided to follow the giants to find out the truth. The giants had a long stride and were not slow. Guo Sen followed them with his eyes. After climbing over 2 hills, they came to a big river. They jumped into the river, stood up quickly, and swam to the forest on the other side. At the end of the forest was a hilly area. The giants stopped after arriving here. Guo Sen saw that dozens of giants with straw ropes tied to their heads were carrying some stones and huge trees, and walking towards these giants. But unexpectedly, when those guys saw these giants, they immediately stopped in place, and finally put down the things in their hands and knelt down. This is a bit puzzling. What's going on? Could it be that there are also levels among giants? The giant holding a wooden stick tied with gold wire did not pay attention to the group with straw ropes tied to their heads, but walked past them casually, and went deeper into the hills. Guo Sen saw that the straw rope giants stood up again, took those things, and piled them on a clearing not far away where all the trees had been pulled out. What are they doing? After moving those things, what kind of building should we build? Just as he was thinking, Guo Sen found that the merchant giants had stopped in front of a hill with a huge cave dug out. The cave was dark, and Guo Sen saw the flickering fire inside. "Chief, we are back. Bringing the sacrifices you need." The book written by my friends Aoleo, Zhuxian Liu, has a lot of imagination. If you like it, please collect it. Chapter 94, Sacrifice and Miasma. Guo Sen couldn't remember how many times he had heard the word sacrifice. It seemed that he had heard this term too many times from the Birdman tribe, and it made him feel a little disgusted. However, when this giant said it, Guo Sen still felt a little fresh. The giants, who fit the term simple-minded and strong-limbed, did not seem to be a group of stupid people without intelligence as he imagined. On the contrary, they could trade with the armored orcs and learn their language, which was really a big contrast. Now, the word sacrifice was mentioned to someone in the cave, which really surprised Guo Senator. If there is a sacrifice, it means that there is also an object of sacrifice, and the most important position, the priest. It is understandable for other races, but if there is a priest among the giants, his dress. The picture is too beautiful to imagine. The giants who are naturally tall and strong are probably the least suitable for this profession except for those insects, right? I see. Bring those artifacts here. Guo Sen heard a voice that seemed unusually old muttering in the cave. It seems that this so-called chief is really old. Guo Sen followed the giants holding the leather bags into the cave. The dim flames illuminated the vast space, and he immediately saw a giant lying on a pile of furs. Unlike the giants he had seen before, this aging guy was much shorter and thinner, and his whole body was almost skin and bones. If these giants hadn't called him chief, Guo Sen would have really thought he was a tall and thin spy who had sneaked in. The giants brought the gold artifacts to the chief, who had already sat up tremblingly, and put them on the ground. They stepped back and knelt together. The quantity this time is not enough. The leader took a deep breath. Guo Sen saw that except for his unusually large abdomen, he really had no meat on other parts. However, his face did not look much different from those giants. He was not as old as he imagined. Is this guy sick? Otherwise, his body shape is really a bit strange. Chief, their demands are getting higher and higher, and we are giving them more and more things. A giant said with his head down, and several people beside him nodded repeatedly. The tears of the god Limuta flowed on their land, and we can only seek these supreme divine objects from their hands. The leader said, and coughed twice, while pressing his stomach. These are not enough to pray to the god Limuta to eliminate the miasma in our bodies. Hurry up and gather the tribesmen to find more prey and redstones, and exchange them for the artifacts we need. Yes, chief. The giant stood up, and turned around to walk out of the cave. The chief, with one hand on his stomach and the other stroking the gold, seemed to be in great distress, sighing. Guo Sen understood something. It seemed that these giants wanted to use the gold to sacrifice to the guy named Limuta god and beg for the miasma to disappear, so they went hunting and mining to satisfy the material desires of the armored orcs in exchange for more gold. Speaking of miasma, Guo Sen remembered that he had heard of this kind of thing from previous races before. The first time was when the White Wolf tribe buried the dead body. The leader said that, if the dead body was thrown in the wilderness, miasma would appear, making it impossible for people to get close. The second time was the Fruit and Vegetable Mush tribe. The leader there said that eating meat would cause miasma and lead to death, so they considered eating only fruits and vegetables. This so-called miasma is things like germs and parasites. Primitive people with lower civilization and no concept of medical skills could not understand the existence of such things. Like these giants, they would leave the hope of eliminating miasma to gods. However, this is absolutely impossible to achieve, no matter how many so-called tributes they offer. Of course, it is not ruled out that individuals with stronger resistance can survive by relying on their own immunity. These people who survive will be more obsessed with offering sacrifices to please the gods. For example, look at the Birdmen. They believe in the powerful spiritual power brought by the god in it, and attribute all successes and failures to the gifts or punishments of gods. They are extremely pious and deeply obsessed with it. But if they cannot resist the miasma and die, unfortunately, the primitive people who believe in gods will blame themselves for not doing what they should do, so they end up like this. The ignorance of the primitive civilization era is the lack of understanding of this world, which also gave rise to this primitive belief. Its emergence was the beginning of primitive people's fear of nature, and it was also the bud of a new culture. Guo Sen looked at the chief who was repeatedly stroking the gold, and his overly large belly. The miasma the chief just mentioned should be the thing that caused him to become skinny and big-bellied. Guo Sen remembered that the chief just said it was the miasma on us. Could it be that there were other people in this giant tribe who also became like this? He left his sight from the cave and looked around. He found that this vast hilly area seemed to be ruled by giants. Guo Sen saw more giants in and outside the caves of all sizes. Their total number was nearly 1,000, which was really quite a lot. Unlike what Guo Sen imagined, the civilization level of this giant race did not seem to be too low. They had the technology to make fire and use flames, and they could weave various tools with dry bark and hay, and they also had the dexterity to peel off animal skins completely. The sticks made of hardwood processed with hard and sharp stones are also the most handy weapons they can find. In order to increase its firmness and power, they also got the gold wire from the armored orcs and wrapped the sticks to make them more powerful weapons. The giants are the masters of this huge forest. Their existence is a deterrent, so Guo Sen did not see anything like wooden fences seen in other tribes. Giants of all sizes, whether lifting boulders, waving giant trees directly, or even chasing prey in the forest, are always showing their presence. However, Guo Sen also found giants with skin and bones, and swollen abdomens like the chief in some caves. They have the same symptoms, and are almost completely unable to move. Many people look even more terrifying than the chief. What kind of disease is this so-called miasma? Why are there so many patients at the same time? Recently, the author has too many personal stories. After all, the main business is selling succulents, you know, and I have to give a few classes recently, so the update may be slower. I'm really sorry to everyone. Before Friday, there will be only one update. When it goes on sale on Friday, there will be 4 or 5 updates, and please understand. Chapter 95 Explosion. Through observation, Guo Sen also discovered a strange phenomenon. This race of giants seems to really have the concept of level. The giants carrying huge trees and stones seen before are the lowest level in the entire tribe. No matter where Guo Sen saw such guys with ropes tied on their heads, he found that they were busy doing various rough work. Guo Sen found that they seemed to have low IQ and slow reactions. The ones who fought with the giant insects before were also of this type. Their number also accounted for the largest number of the total number, nearly 300. Guo Sen called them hard laborers. Judging from the attitude of other giants towards them, these giants are of the lowest status. The second type is the giant who wears white animal fur around his waist and is always wandering around in the forest hunting. After Guo Sen heard the loud noise in the forest, he saw these terrifying guys violently killing several one-eyed long-haired beasts that were bigger than the trucks he remembered. Their bodies are not so bloated, but more fit. Their skeletons look much slimmer than those of the laborers. The well-developed muscles are adorned on them. From top to bottom, they are almost triangular. They seem to be better at using the explosive power brought by strong muscles. After increasing their speed, they use thick wooden sticks or strong bone sticks tied with ropes to smash the skulls of their prey. They are quite powerful in fighting. In half a day, they hunted enough prey for the whole tribe to eat for several days. There are about 200 of them. Basically, they are either hunting or on the way to hunt. Guo Sen called these fighting maniacs violent hunters. The third type is the craftsman class, composed of female giants and giant children. All the weavings in the tribe, as well as the burden of making weapons, digging caves and cooking food, all fall on these people. They seem to have an easy life, but in fact they are the most tired among the whole tribe after the hard laborers. It can be said that except for moving stones and giant trees and hunting, they do everything. These people are the most numerous, with a total of 500 people. Their status is similar to that of the laborers. However, Guo Sen also saw that some of the children here were fat and slow in movement, while others were fast and muscular. When they grow up in the future, they should also grow into laborers and violent hunters. The fourth type is also the smallest, with less than 10 people in total. They are the giants who are responsible for sacrifices and trading with the armored orcs. Guo Sen called them golden walkers. The IQ of the golden walkers is relatively the highest, which can be seen from their previous exchanges with the armored orcs. At the same time, their status is also very high. Guo Sen feels that, except for the chief, their work is the easiest compared to other giants. When there is no need for sacrifice, they are responsible for conveying the chief's words and carrying various things to trade gold with the armored orcs. However, they are also relatively the most tired. When the chief is ill, they have to convey almost all orders to the laborers, craftsmen and violent hunters one by one, and they are always running around. The hierarchy of this tribe is roughly in the order of chief, golden walker, wild hunter, craftsman, and laborer. Among the patients, who were affected by the miasma and became skinny and big-bellied, the number of wild hunters and laborers accounted for a large proportion. There were a total of 35 patients in the entire tribe. This number is not too much, but not too little. In addition to the chief, there seemed to be someone who was more seriously ill. The whole person seemed to be drained, except for the ridiculously large stomach. It felt like the stomach absorbed all the nutrients in the body. Guo Sen observed for several days. He found that the stomachs of those patients would become bigger and bigger, and even the epidermis would become translucent, and their expressions seemed to be extremely painful. At the same time, their appetite seemed to be several times that of other giants, but they seemed to not excrete, which was really puzzling. This strange disease is not contagious. After so many days, the giants who are responsible for taking care of them are still the same, without any change. Guo Sen pondered. Could it be constipation? It shouldn't be. Constipated people can't eat so much, and then they are ridiculously thin except for their stomachs, right? Food poisoning? That should be diarrhea and loose stools, not this. Guo Sen thought of various possibilities, but there was no reasonable explanation. Until he suddenly found that among the laborers, who often went out hunting and carrying felled trees, there was another unlucky person who had this serious disease. At first, there was nothing wrong with their stomachs, but their hands and feet were not very flexible. However, in less than half a day, they could no longer get out of bed. As their appetite continued to grow, their stomachs became bigger and bigger. Strange. Could it be that they were really poisoned? The gold walkers exchanged a lot of gold ornaments from the armored orcs and came to the cave where the chief was. We can start the sacrifice. Carry me over. The chief's voice trembled, and he seemed to be between coma and semi-coma, and was extremely weak. The gold walkers collected all the gold objects in the cave, and 4 people carried the leader out of the cave. Guo Sen saw that almost all the giants had gathered outside the cave, whether they were laborers, craftsmen, or other violent hunters and gold walkers. They had formed a team, a dark mass. They followed the footsteps of the gold walkers who were carrying the chief, and came to the bottom of the tallest hill in the tribe. There was a wide flat ground at the bottom of the hill, and a nearly rectangular boulder was placed in the center. The gold walkers put the chief next to the long stone, and placed the gold objects on top of the stone. They shone brightly under the light of the stars, and were extremely sacred. 2 people supported the leader who could no longer stand up, while the others stood with their hands behind their backs beside the boulder. All the sick giants were also carried to the vicinity of the boulder, and laid side by side. They seemed to be enduring the pain, closing their eyes, and not daring to make a sound. The laborers, craftsmen and violent hunters also gathered together, waiting for the start of the sacrifice. Great God Limiter, as your people, please forgive our disrespect and... In the light of the golden reflected stars, the chief was sweating and panting at the beginning, but before he finished speaking, he had completely fainted. The scene was also in a panic, because of this sudden change. After all, the sacrifice has not yet begun. Will this become disrespectful to God Limiter? After a brief panic, the pious giants fell to the ground collectively, and no one dared to look up. And the patients lying on the ground all fainted. Guo Sen was a little surprised. How could these people grasp the timing of fainting so well? While at the same time, at this moment, all the giants lying on the ground suddenly screamed in unison. Their swollen abdomens also burst open like an explosion at the same time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. You look delicious. Amid the miserable screams, the abdomens of all the patients who were almost lined up in a row exploded at the same time. After a strange muffled sound, blood and broken meat burst out and splashed all over the ground, as if it was raining blood. In an instant, this also made all the giants lying on the ground stand up in fear. However, at the same time, they also saw an even more terrifying scene. Dozens of black shadows lay on the dead patients, making extremely unpleasant chirps. They were almost covered with a layer of brown carapace. Each of them was about 1 meter long, with 4 pairs of arthropod-like feet, covered with mucus whiskers all over the body, and a spiral bulge on the tail. Their 2 pairs of black bean-like eyes kept moving, and finally they all opened their terrifying big mouths, showing countless triangular sharp teeth in their mouths. What else could this be, if not the strange insects underground? Exclamation mark. The strange insects did not care about the giants who were already scared silly around them, but became very interested in the corpses of the giants who hatched them. With an indescribable tremor, the strange insects began to gnaw the flesh and bones of the original host. Yes, those monsters. Many laborers were frightened and fell to the ground, their voices trembling. It seemed that they had seen this kind of strange insect before. More giants ran to the back. Many of them were craftsmen who ran with their children. As for the golden walkers, they were the worst group of people. They actually fainted. In this critical moment, the violent hunters did not panic or faint like others, but raised the thick wooden sticks that had been placed beside them at the fastest speed and ran towards the monsters that suddenly appeared. Defeat them each. Kill. After the tallest violent hunter roared, he led several people around him to the place where the chief fell, and several people swung their weapons almost at the same time. Puff. Squeaky hey hey. A loud noise sounded, accompanied by the screams of the strange insects. The thick green juice burst out instantly, exploding a heavy rain. The other violent hunters also launched a surprise attack on the bugs on the ground that were still gnawing on the meat. Countless screams and disgusting sounds of breaking insect bodies continued to ring out. In a short time, they almost wiped out the strange bugs. However, the bugs were not all vegetarians. Some of them dodged the first wave of attacks from the violent hunters at a very fast speed, and soon supported their bodies with their newly grown insect limbs, and began to fight back. However, these strange bugs obviously overestimated their strength. Although they had terrifying big mouths, they forgot that they were only about 1 meter long larvae. In front of the violent hunters, who had an absolute advantage in height and speed, and were holding weapons, the only outcome they could get was to be beaten into a pool of mud and thick green juice. The violent hunters quickly resolved the battle. They panted and looked at the dozens of dead bodies lying on the ground in the exploded insect bodies with extremely sad eyes. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they couldn't believe that these strange bugs actually came out of their companions' abdomens. The violent hunters helped up all the golden walkers who were unconscious on the ground and woke them up. The laborers and craftsmen who had escaped before also returned here. In the dazzling light of the gold ornaments, they looked at the tragic scene on the ground together, silent. Guo Sen also felt incomprehensible about the series of events that happened before and after. He really didn't expect that the giant with such a strong body could become a patient with a belly like a big bull. Not the various diseases he had thought of, nor poisoning, but the giant worms lurking in the caves he had seen before. Guo Sen clearly remembered that these giant worms should have been slowly hatched from the eggs carried by the mother worm. Why did they treat the giants as hosts now, madly absorbing nutrients in their stomachs and cruelly bursting out of their stomachs? What happened in between? He thought carefully. Suddenly he remembered that before, there were also laborers who went out to carry wood and violent hunters who went hunting who suddenly became patients. Could it be that they were drilled into the stomachs by worms at that time? The laborers might be so stupid, but the wild hunters shouldn't be. How did this happen? Guo Sen turned his sight to the area where the laborers and wild hunters often moved around. He suddenly found some dead animals in the forest. These animals were also very thin except for their abdomens. He used his mind. The abdomen split open instantly, and a young insect wrapped in mucus flowed out with the internal organs. After struggling in the air for a while, it slowly stopped moving. Sure enough, animals can also be parasitized, so it seems that their targets are not just giants. Giants eat cooked meat, and they shouldn't pick up dead animals like this to eat. So where did the larvae of the insects enter the bodies of animals and giants? Guo Sen turned his sight underground again. He carefully looked for signs of giant insect activity nearby. Soon, he found the giant insect nest he had searched before. This was not the group close to the armored orcs. Compared with that group, the giant insects here have no natural enemies near them, and seem to be living a comfortable life. In this nest, that has been dug into a vast underground space by countless giant insects, the mother insect seems to be living a much more comfortable life than the one seen before. Her body is also more bloated and fat, and her back is not covered with thick insect eggs. Its main job seems to be to continuously lay eggs in the underground hole. The other insects have dug quite a lot of tunnels leading to various places in the forest. Guo Sen saw that when they kept crawling out, they were all covered with a thick layer of transparent small balls. There is no doubt that they are the insect eggs just seen. Did the insects take the eggs outside? Guo Sen seemed to understand something. He continued to observe. After the insects crawled out of the tunnels, they came to the forest and grassland again. When passing by various plants, the eggs on their bodies also rubbed against them. Some of the smarter ones would run to the side of the giant trees and shrubs full of fruits and deliberately hang a large number of insect eggs on them. When the eggs and fruits were put together, their translucent and moist appearance created a certain illusion. They were like pearls, gathered together, and seemed more tempting than the fruits. Guo Sen saw that some strange looking animals came down to pick fruits to eat after the giant insects went back into the tunnel. Some of them put the eggs into their mouths and swallowed them after seeing them. The case was solved. That's how it was. He thought there was some special method before, but he didn't expect it to be so simple. All he had to do was pretend to be delicious. There have been too many things going on these days. Forgive me for only updating for 2 days. Chapter 97 A Special Road. In order to survive and reproduce, the giant insects, who have the consciousness of dominating the group, seem to have come up with a pretty good idea. The small insects drilled out of the tunnel and came to the jungle and grassland, especially those places where fruits grew. Then they hung piles of fruits nearby, disguised as fruits that looked very appetizing. When the animals and giants saw such fruits, they only needed to put them in their mouths to complete the entire parasitic process designed by the giant insects. After the eggs, that were not chewed by luck, entered the body, they began to grow extremely quickly. The larvae, which absorbed the nutrients from the host frantically, absorbed most of the fat and muscle from the host in a very short time, and when the hungry host took food, they directly devoured the food, making it impossible for the host to get more nutrition, thus becoming weaker. However, judging from the symptoms of those giants, these larvae seemed to be smart enough not to damage their internal organs, causing accidents such as death, so as to deprive themselves of the cradle of nutrition. Guo Sen recalled that after these giants whose abdomens were swollen to a high degree were exposed to the sun, the larvae burst out of their abdomens all at once. The giant insect race seems to have evolved a special way to reproduce. However, Guo Sen still has some questions. Why are there so few of these insects on this continent, which have no natural enemies, and can reproduce by parasitism? Logically, it shouldn't be, since they can kill several giants under the dominant consciousness of the mother insect. Their teeth are terrifyingly sharp, their tails are electrified, and their superb reproductive ability makes them almost invincible. Guo Sen is sure that any creature with the same conditions as these giant insects can occupy this land. But why don't they? Is there something that restricts them and prevents them from becoming such a huge race? Guo Sen shifted his sight and found another giant insect nest a little further away. This place is almost the same as the previous two and is also located in the underground area of a grassland. However, there are also traces of armored orcs here, and their existence makes life difficult for the insect race. Guo Sen carefully compared the 3 giant insect nests on this land, looking for their common points. The nest is also located underground in the grassland, and it also has a cluster consciousness dominated by the queen, and its range of activities is limited to a very small area. In addition, when the strange insects are digging their nests, they don't seem to be very fast. Under the command of the queen, all the insects will dig down the soil little by little when digging, even though they can quickly reach the ground like digging a tunnel. What is this for? Just when Guo Sen was puzzled, a small insect suddenly lay down in the soil and rolled, howling. Then, all the other insects stopped moving instantly, and together with the queen, they began to dig tunnels upwards, and crawled up in a hurry. What happened? Guo Sen was puzzled by this sudden movement. He looked at the insect, and found that it was completely motionless. Damn, dead. What happened? There are no other creatures here? Besides, what can kill such a huge creature instantly? However, soon, the groundwater gushing out in front of the insect gave the answer. The speed of the groundwater rising was not slow. Guo Sen saw that the slowest insect rolled around after standing on a little water at its tail and finally fell into the water with a twitch, completely motionless. The rest of the insects quickly crawled to the ground, not daring to delay for a moment. However, it seemed that a greater danger was waiting for them on the ground. The sky was covered with dark clouds, and the wind was blowing across the grassland. The moment the insects just got out of the ground, the heavy rain began to fall violently. There was a constant flow of groundwater underground, and the ground was getting heavier and heavier. The insects didn't even have the slightest way to retreat. Squeak, hey, hey. All the insects crawled towards the mother insect frantically, covering her body, as if they wanted to use their bodies to completely cover it, and avoid the invasion of the rainstorm. The twisted screams resounded over this lush grassland. The efforts of the insects controlled by the collective consciousness seemed insignificant in this rainstorm. The mother worm covered with layers of insect corpses soon became a corpse under the influence of sporadic raindrops, twitching constantly, and finally became completely motionless. The rain did not want to stop, even though the lives of the creatures that feared it had already disappeared. The thunderstorm played the song of destruction for the giant insects. Guo Sen watched all this. He also understood why there were only a few nests on this continent, and why their number was so small. There were natural enemies, the armored orcs, who came to steal the insect eggs, and there was a fatal flaw, that they would die, as long as they came into contact with water. In fact, these giant insects had a very difficult life. Since they appeared, they have been evolving into such a huge body, and have even a unique reproduction skill of parasitism. Unexpectedly, they have become the miserable state they are now. If they are unlucky, the remaining 2 giant insect nests may also die collectively due to accidentally digging groundwater or a leak caused by a heavy rain. If that is the case, this race is really a tragedy. Guo Sen moved his sight to the other 2 giant insect nests and counted them. The number of this sad race on this sphere is now less than 300. If they can live in a place like the Gobi or the desert, they must be living a comfortable life, right? In such a place, there will definitely not be the kind of rainstorm just now, let alone the groundwater that can be dug up by mistake, let alone the armored orcs to steal their eggs, and there will be no overly cold climate that prevents them from moving normally. However, there is no if. If they can survive, this non-humanoid creature that Guo Sen has seen for the first time, and the creature that dominates the collective consciousness that he has seen for the first time, can also develop a very unique civilization on his sphere. Unfortunately, Guo Sen raised his sight. The 3 intelligent creatures that survive on this continent all have very unique ways of survival. The giants have a very powerful tribe. Their physical conditions that can be proud of all races, as well as the hierarchical concept of orderly division of labor, also allow the tribe to continue to develop rapidly. The armored beastmen live underground, in caves, and even between mountains. They use their environment to develop the process of making and smelting gold, and use it as a trading item to exchange food and ore from the giants. The strange insects built their nests in the dry soil far away from the water source. With a sense of clustering, they have been using a very special way of reproduction to expand their population. There is a more complicated relationship between these 3 races. The strange insects will ambush the giants and use them as food, and will also hide their eggs in fruits and parasitize them. The armored beastmen use the eggs of the strange insects as their staple food, and there is a barter trade between them and the giants. However, the delicate balance between them will be destroyed one day. What will happen after the destruction? It will be on the shelves tomorrow. The author of PUG is looking forward to your first order. Thank you all. Chapter 98 remarks on the release. It will be on the shelves tomorrow. Thank you all for your continued support, and thank you to the editor for your care. When I first started writing, I knew it was an extremely bumpy road. From the first book of Skeleton Soldiers, to the succulent plants with many poison points, to the rebirth article full of ambition, but defeated by reality, and then after more than 3 months of wandering, I turned on the computer again, and wrote this book. I became a planet. The moment of putting it on the shelves is also the moment of confrontation between reality and dreams. I lost to reality the first 3 times. Although there has been progress every time, it cannot cover up the achievements of this book so far. As an old loser, every time I start writing, I think I must succeed, but when it comes to the moment of putting it on the shelves, I realize that I'm too naive. I'm no longer young as an author. I can't be as high-spirited as I was in my student days, and when I just entered the society, and my mind is full of wild ideas. In the contest with reality, I no longer have the so-called capital to try this dream career again and again. If the 4th book fails, I don't have much time left. Age, life, and everything I'm about to face. The performance and subscriptions of this book are the limiting conditions for whether I can continue to write. So, I'll stop here. The worldview I constructed for this book is very broad, and I also buried quite a lot of foreshadowing in it. After the midterm, everyone will understand why the author wrote such a strange world full of contradictions and paradoxes. Okay, I won't say much, otherwise it will spoil the plot. Anyway, please subscribe. Please subscribe to the genuine version! Exclamation mark. Please support me! Exclamation mark. I will update 4 times after it is launched. After that, I will update 3 times a day for a month! Exclamation mark. There will definitely be extra updates and bursts. If the performance is good, everything will be fine. If the first subscription exceeds 500, I will update 1 more time. If there is a silver cute, I will update 50 times. I'm thinking, although I'm no longer the tentacle monster who updated 25,000 words a day, why not give it a try for the dream of writing novels? Exclamation mark. Thank you all for your support again. PS. Please don't use the free coins to subscribe to the first chapter. That doesn't count as a subscription. Chapter 99. Déjà vu. Each of the 7 continents has its own unique intelligent life. They all have their own civilizations, and they are constantly multiplying in the struggle with the environment. After taking a rough look at the 2 unexplored continents on the planet, Guo Sen came to a conclusion. There is basically no intelligent life on them. The reason for this is that most of the land in the southern part of the 2 continents is located in the frigid zone, and only the scattered and rugged coastline and nearby islands in the north are at the junction of the cold temperate zone. The winter here is long and cold, with many glaciers and snow. The entire continent is basically covered by coniferous forests and permafrost, and towering and rugged mountains and low-lying plains occupy most of the land area. On the plains, lakes and swamps are everywhere, and the existence of life is also extremely rare. As for the northernmost piece, it has been completely swallowed by glaciers, leaving only a few extremely tall mountains on it. Under the tops of those white snow-covered mountains, the black mountains are extremely eye-catching. Guo Sen felt that in such a cold and humid environment, no advanced intelligent creatures would be born. After all, compared to other lands, the conditions for living in such a place are too harsh. Guo Sen looked at the land in the extreme south. The severe cold weather also made the biological resources here extremely scarce. Unlike the broad-leaved forest with a wide variety of species, the fruits that the coniferous forest can provide are not enough to support a huge ecosystem. This means that, even if there are any intelligent life forms here, they cannot maintain the most basic energy intake. Guo Sen's side quickly searched this land. Between the snowfields, swamps, and forests, he found quite a lot of herbivores and a few carnivores. However, the biggest discovery was a familiar creature on the bank of a rushing river. It was a huge animal with an extremely slender neck and a water blue body. They have a lizard-like head, a total length of about 10 meters, short and thick limbs, and the places that were originally limbs have now completely evolved into paddle-like things with webbed membranes on the fingertips. The biggest feature is the uneven carapace covering the body, which makes them look like dinosaurs with their heads put into a huge turtle shell. When Guo Sen saw them here for the first time, he immediately knew what they were. Turtle dragons. This was the extremely cliched name he gave them when he first saw this creature many years ago. As a dinosaur that still survives in the ocean, it is a miracle that these turtle dragons have not been eliminated by the increasingly harsh living environment. Moreover, when Guo Sen threw a few turtle dragons from the tropical ocean area to the extreme south on a whim, he did not expect that they would survive and reproduce to this day. Another thing that made Guo Sen very satisfied was that these turtle dragons seemed to be like fish in water in this place where no one was shitting. Their bodies became larger and larger, from about 5 meters before to more than 10 meters now. Perhaps this extremely cold place is more suitable for them. Guo Sen sighed as he watched these turtle dragons constantly emerge from the river and gradually gather more and more. However, he unexpectedly discovered that many of these guys who originally ate seaweed in the seawater were chewing strange looking fish and sea worms. Hey, aren't you vegetarians? Why did you change your taste? Guo Sen couldn't understand this abnormal phenomenon. In his impression, herbivores are herbivores, and they shouldn't become meat lovers. Even if they want to, their digestive organs won't allow it. Could it be that this turtle dragon is actually an omnivorous dinosaur that is hiding deep? Just like Panda, who usually eats bamboo in a cute way, he is actually a beast that eats meat. The turtle dragons gathered more and more, and Guo Sen couldn't help counting them in boredom. There are now nearly 70 or 80 of them on the riverbank. Such a large size, plus such a large number, makes it extremely difficult for them to be ignored, even if they want to. However, this party didn't last too long. The turtle dragons sank their front and rear fins into the river, and then went downstream again. Guo Sen was a little surprised. Aren't they like submarines in the water? Why do they look like big ships now? The speed of the turtle dragon group is not slow. It didn't take too long for them to reach the mouth of the river. At the mouth of the sea, there is a vast delta area. It is located in the north of the land, between the frigid zone and the temperate zone. The plants on the land have changed from sparse coniferous forests to dense broad-leaved forests, and they are not covered by ice and snow. In this early morning, animals of all sizes are active in the forest, revealing vitality everywhere. The turtle dragons did not stop here, but continued to move forward and swam into the ocean. Guo Sen looked forward and saw several huge shadows looming in the sea fog. He raised his sight and looked down at the turtle dragons in those huge shadows. It was an archipelago area that was not small in size. When he had roughly observed this land in the extreme south before, Guo Sen had also noticed these archipelagos of tens of thousands of large and small, but he had never observed them as carefully as he did now. Now, it seems that these islands are almost covered by dense jungles, and there are many rivers on some of the larger islands, flowing from the towering mountains to the ocean. This seems to be somewhat similar to the land with intelligent life that I have seen before. Guo Sen's expectation of whether there is intelligent life here, which had cooled down before, suddenly rekindled. Although this place is close to the frigid zone and there will be long winters, it seems that the ecology on the islands is much better than that on the land just now. Especially the largest island. Almost all the terrain that can be seen on those habitable lands exists here. The turtle dragons kept moving forward and came to the largest island. After swimming for a while, they suddenly stopped in a bay with a lot of stones. Guo Sen was a little surprised. What are they doing here? Looking around, there are jagged rocks, clear and calm sea water, and unexpectedly deep. Could it be that this is their real settlement? At this moment, a noisy sound suddenly sounded from the shore. Guo Sen shifted his gaze from the turtle dragon to something that excited him. It was a group of rough primitive people wearing animal skins, and with beards all over their faces. Chapter 104 Something irreplaceable. There is no doubt that these dirty guys who came to meet the turtle dragons were primitive people. Specifically, they were primitive humans. Like the fruit and vegetable paste tribe and the warlike tribe that was once ruled by the lizard people, they all had guys who looked similar to the earthlings. Guo Sen originally thought that except for that continent, there would be no more primitive people on this planet, but he didn't expect to see them again in this cold place in the extreme south. However, compared with the previous two races, the primitive people he saw now seemed to care less about their appearance. Guo Sen had never seen such a sloppy race. Their hair was abnormally abundant, and it seemed that everyone's hair was quite curly, which looked abnormally fluffy. If you didn't pay attention, you would think that these guys in primitive civilization had invented hats and were so fashionable that everyone wore one. The beards on their faces were also overgrown, and it seemed that, because they never took care of them, several strands of hair even stuck together, which looked weird and funny. In addition to these, the animal skins they wore were tied up in a simple way, and they were all stained with various stains that were hard to tell what they were. Even if you didn't smell them, it was estimated that they were smelly. Of course, in addition to these sloppy places, there were still some bright spots. For example, the large animal skin bags they carried on their backs. The things with white luster seemed to be extremely cherished by these primitive people. There were almost no stains. From the appearance, even if there was nothing in them, they were also very delicate decorations. The open animal skin bags also had two very tight leather straps, which could be easily removed and carried on the back. They were very similar to school bags, but with a unique flavor. The pockets were full of what seemed to be some round white dried meat, and it was impossible to tell what they were. However, Guo Sen could also see that this effect could only be achieved after careful sewing. I'm afraid that these primitive people have quite powerful techniques for grinding bone needles, as well as quite sophisticated and skilled sewing skills. Another thing is the pair of huge white sharp horns that the primitive people pinned around their waists. The sharp corner is nearly half a meter long, more than 20 centimeters in diameter, and hollow inside. It is filled with a lot of clean water, shaking with the movements of the primitive people. Is this the cup they use to drink water? In addition to these two, Guo Sen is also very interested in the strange weapons with 3 gun tips in their hands. These things are obviously made of metal. They shine with dark golden light in the light of the stars. There is no doubt that they are the metal alloys that he has seen in many tribes' bronze. However, judging from this special shape, these primitive people seem to have quite powerful smelting technology. This weapon can almost be compared with the powerful claw blade of the Birdman tribe. This weapon looks like a trident. What is it used for? Could it be? Guo Sen looked at the turtle dragons who seemed to be looking at the primitive people with a very gentle gaze. Are they here to mess with these stupid guys? However, something that surprised Guo Sen even more soon happened. The hundreds of primitive people armed with weapons who came to the shore did not attack the turtle dragons, but each took out a black thing from the extremely dirty animal clothes and suddenly threw it at the heads of the turtle dragons. Puff. The turtle dragons actually made an unimaginable strange and cute sound, stretched their necks, and grabbed these black balls in midair. For a moment, the calm sea surface rolled up, and the waves hit the black rocks at the feet of the primitive people, splashing waves like foam. The turtle dragons who accurately ate all the black balls seemed very satisfied and swam to the shore one by one. Puff pooyee. Then, these primitive people actually followed the turtle dragons' tails on the shore and climbed onto their tortoise shells one by one. Oh, what kind of operation is this? The turtle dragons have abandoned the pride of being dinosaurs and become the pets of tiny primitive people. Guo Sen thought about it a lot, but he never thought that the result would be this. More than 300 primitive people each took the shells of 70 or 80 turtle dragons and seemed to be used to it. After finding a good position, they sat down. When they were all seated, these turtle dragons stopped other actions, withdrew their tails from the shore, and swung their forefins, gradually leaving the shore. Guo Sen understood that it was not that the primitive people treated the turtle dragons as small islands, but turned them into their own riding props, turning them into a large ship swimming in the ocean. This operation is very cool. It was the first time that Guo Sen saw such a civilization with a sense of navigation. Among the civilizations he had seen before, there were very few who could go into the water. At most, they could only take water from the river to smelt, and there were also giant insects that could not touch water at all. The primitive people on this island not only tamed the huge turtle dragons, but also had the consciousness of sailing, which really made Guo Sen's eyes light up. The primitive people rode on the turtle dragons that moved steadily in the waves, and seemed to be quite adapted. The minimalist tridents in their hands also shone dazzlingly under the light of the stars. Not long after, the turtle dragon led the primitive people to the delta area on the land that Guo Sen had just seen. After walking along the river for a while, they finally stopped. The turtle dragons, like before, put their tails on the shore, waiting for the primitive people to get off their backs and walk to the land. This scene seemed a bit absurd, and Guo Sen felt that he should adapt to it well. After all, from now on, these sloppy primitive people seemed to be much more powerful than the birdman tribes that he had seen before, which he thought were the most powerful. The birdmen were at most combat masters, but if they fought with these primitive people who could control the turtle dragons, they would be beaten away by the tails of these pet turtle dragons before they could even start. After the primitive people came to the shore, they immediately gathered again. Guo Sen couldn't help but feel a little curious about the purpose of their coming to this place. What on earth could drive these guys to come to this land nearly 100 kilometers away? Could it be that this area is the location of their tribe? Or is this where they get their main food or minerals? It's better to listen directly than to guess. Guo Sen had an idea. My fellow tribesmen, in order to make our irreplaceable things, we once again came to this land on Lapu. The tribesmen in the tribe are also waiting for our return and the extremely rich harvest in our hands. The person who spoke seemed to be the guy with the most lush beard in the group, and also the one with the dirtiest body. All the primitive people seemed very excited, with extremely excited expressions on their faces. For the tribesmen. For the irreplaceable things. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.